Chapter 349 False Accusation. Chapter 349 False Accusation. Within mere moments, a considerable number of people raced over, and all surged forth into the courtyard. Junior Sister Zitai, are you all right? Who molested you? Tell me, I will tear him apart. To dare to have intentions even on Junior Sister Zitai, he's really tired of living, they exclaimed one by one. Those that were qualified to live on this peak were at least in the spiritual ocean tier, and there were even some disciples in their 30s and 40s who had already broken through to the spiritual pedestal tier. Among them, there were some that could possibly break through to the flower blossom tier, or even the spiritual infant tier. Ao Zitai was indeed very popular. Just one shout from her, and so many people had immediately raced over. Some of them had even been in seclusion yet still ran over without a care. Beautiful women were a limited resource in the first place, and there were even fewer beauties that had considerable cultivation levels. What more when Ao Zitai was unusually beautiful. Ao Zitai was indeed an excellent actress. Her previous arrogant, cold, and merciless expression was completely withdrawn from her face. She had fallen and sat on the ground, with tears coating her face, and sobbed. They wanted to molest me, and force me. Woo woo woo, I don't want to live anymore. Hong, instantly, everyone's rage was ignited, and they all glared furiously at Linghan and Yukayu, looking like they wanted nothing more than to swallow the both of them whole and skin them alive. However, there were still some that had not lost their senses, bewitched by Ao Zitai. Someone asked, "That's not really possible, is it? In this kind of place?" This was a place under the close supervision of the Winter Moon sect, and any bit of disturbance sensed would immediately attract the attention of the elites of the sect. What's so impossible about it? Or are you doubtful of Junior Sister Zitai's words and her charm? However, these doubts were immediately drowned out. Perhaps these two had the same thoughts, and that's why they were so outrageously bold to dare use brute force here. Kill them! Quite a number had eyes red with anger. Cough! Yukayu stood up and said, "Senior and junior brothers, you all are being too arbitrary. Just because of one word from her, you do not care about what the truth is. Others may not dare, but if it was senior brother Yu," someone said. When the others heard this, they nodded respectively. Yukayu was the great-grandson of Grand Elder Yu, and if he had indeed molested Ao Zitai, then as long as the elder patriarch of the Yu clan was willing to make a bit of compromise, it was not an impossible thing for Yukayu to marry Ao Zitai in recompense. When they thought this, a considerable number felt a layer of cold sweat accumulate on their bodies. Thank goodness they managed to get here in time. Now, the majority had already lost their senses due to their overwhelming anger, and even if there were some who were still rational, they were in the minority. "Apprehend the two of them and deal with them according to the rules of our sect," they exclaimed, and one after another, they leaped out to take action. "We can spare Yukayu, but Han Lin must be executed. What kind of wretched thing he is to dare to actually molest Junior Sister Ao Zitai? That's right, kill him!" They were all extremely furious. Yukayu was a member of the Yu clan, and no one dared to kill him, but Linghan was a different story. He was just a newbie that had just recently been taken into the sect, and even if he was killed, it was not advisable to offend the masses. How would the sect actually afford to punish all of them just for the sake of one single person? Ao Zitai had naturally foreseen that would be the case, and that was why she had used such an underhanded scheme. Linghan shook his head. Against young men like them, beauty was indeed a powerful weapon. A tiny trick like that was enough to turn these so-called geniuses into rash, hot-blooded fools. Really, even if they were sold off, they'd be counting money for the person who had sold them off. In truth, it was hard to blame them for it. These people had always admired Ao Zitai, and all of a sudden, they heard that their goddess had almost been defiled and raped. They were naturally outraged. In the midst of rage, it was of course natural for them to lose the common sense that they should have. He humphed lightly and exclaimed, "A bunch of idiots!" He had instilled a sliver of intent of a heaven-tier elite in this exclamation. There was not much force behind it, but it was enough to enter directly into the minds of every single one of them. Instantly, they all looked dazed, and calmed down from their fury. There seemed to be something off with this. Even if Yu Kaiyu intended to rape Aoz Tai, he should not have dragged Ling Han in as well. Ling Han beckoned Yu Kaiyu over and signaled the latter to cooperate with him. Then, he said, "Take a look at the clothing on this woman." With a chilla, he began to tear at Yu Kaiyu's clothes, which gave the latter a scare. "If they had been torn by another, they should look like this." Ling Han raised Yu Kaiyu's arm. "But that woman's clothing, He paused a while, and continued. "Senior brother, you tear your own sleeve." Yu Kaiyu finally understood what Ling Han wanted to do, and quickly nodded. With another chilla, he tore open his other sleeve, and indeed, because the angle at which he exerted force was different, the resulting tear looked completely different. Shua, everyone's eyes instantly turned to stare at Aoz Tai. They were all at least in the spiritual ocean tier, so how could they be idiots? Just now, they had only been fooled because of Aoz Tai's beauty, and had their reason overridden by anger, but with Ling Han's reminder, they had all calmed down and begun to consider the matter seriously. Attempted rape was, in the first place, an illogical thing, because this was Yu Kaiyu's personal courtyard, so why had Aoz Tai appeared here? On the other hand, if it was Aoz Tai who was trying to frame them, everything would become logical. "Don't you all trust them? For the sake of escaping punishment, they would of course make a false countercharge." Among the masses, someone immediately called out, making a few of them regain their looks of rage and return to glare at Ling Han and Yu Kaiyu. Ling Han strode out, his eyes sweeping over the crowds, and said, "To hide the head and show the tail, do you think I don't know that you're hiding there?" He directly acted, and pun, there were a few that attempted to stop him, but Ling Han forced them away with a palm strike each. He instantly grabbed onto a man and asked Yu Kaiyu, "Senior brother Yu, do you recognize this person? He should be one of attendant Ao's sons, but as for his name, Yu Kaiyu said after a moment of consideration. Ao Feng really had too many illegitimate children. With a toss, Ling Han threw the man onto the ground and said, "Everyone should know by now that these two belong to the Ao clan. They are merely putting on the trick of covering for one by the other shouting with the crowd." It was very obvious that this guy was there to fan the flames. Silence fell upon the crowd. They were not fools, after all. Aoz Tai could make use of their admiration for her, but ultimately, she could not continue to deceive them forever. Aoz Tai screamed shrilly, "Don't listen to their nonsense. They almost molested me, and are still trying to slander my name. They have gone too far." Ling Han humphed and once again walked towards Aoz Tai. His slender figure created a long shadow on the ground, which shrouded Aoz Tai. What are you doing?" she asked in a trembling voice. "You framed myself and senior brother Ao, so should you not receive some punishment?" Ling Han asked coldly and stretched out a hand to subdue Aoz Tai. "Stop!" Instantly there was a considerable number of people who acted simultaneously, attacking Ling Han at the same time. It was one thing for Aoz Tai to make use of their feelings, but even if they knew that they had been deceived, how could they simply let go of their feelings of admiration just like that? They naturally could not simply stand by and watch as Ling Han made a move against Aoz Tai. "Those who attempt to stop me should pray for luck," Ling Han said coldly, his battle prowess on full power. Pun. 6 flashes of fist chi danced unhindered. Silvery images of dragons surged forth, and those who stood in his way were completely unable to stand against their might. They were all flung away with a punch from him, and it was as if stalks of straw were flying around in the air. Aoz Tai was astonished, and she could no longer pretend to sob piteously on the ground. She hurriedly leaped up, intending to make her escape by ducking into the crowd. There were over 100 spiritual ocean tier martial artists here, and she did not believe Ling Han could defeat all of them in one go. "Your limbs are quite swift," Ling Han smirked coldly. He used the shadow wind motion and instantly appeared behind Aoz Tai. With a hook of his right arm, this woman fell into his grasp. Chapter 350 Killed with a Single Slash. Chapter 350 killed with a single slash. Who is this guy? How could he have such dominating power? One punch was enough to fling 7 martial artists of the spiritual ocean tier away, and furthermore, senior brother Lu is someone in the 6th layer of the spiritual ocean tier. Hiss, when did such a freak appear in our sect? You guys don't know, do you? He is one of the newly accepted disciples this year. Moreover, he has just entered into our sect the day before, and today, he has gained the first-place position in the entrance trials. What? With the 7 sons of Ao family participating, he still managed to get the first place? What kind of news did you guys get? The 7 sons of Ao family, as well as senior brother Yu, have all been defeated by him. I seem to get it now. No wonder Ao Zitai had put on such an act. There were no idiots here, and as long as they could keep their calm, they could very easily understand the ins and outs of the whole story. Han Lin, release junior sister Zitai first, we can discuss things calmly. Someone asked Ling Han for mercy. Ling Han smiled calmly and said, When you all burst in just now, you all looked very fierce, as if you wanted to beat me to death at any moment. I'm really very scared. Everyone was struck speechless. You are so ferocious that you have even defeated all the 7 sons of Ao family, so who amongst the people gathered here would be able to threaten you? But as Ao Zitai was still in his grasp, he could naturally say whatever he liked. Junior brother Han, I know that there is displeasure in your heart, but junior sister Zitai is attendant Ao's beloved daughter, and is also the great-granddaughter of Grand Elder Ao. Someone reminded. Ling Han laughed lightly and said, Senior brother Yu is also Xue Xian, attendant Yu's son, as well as Grand Elder Yu's great-grandson, but this ugly woman had still set him up without the slightest bit of hesitation. Since she has not given any face to him, senior brother Yu naturally need not give her any face either. Yu Kai-yu suddenly gaped. Why was he so suddenly dragged into this issue? But when he thought about it for a moment, he did not say anything to refute Ling Han's words. Ao Zitai's actions had made him extremely displeased, and he had the intention to make her suffer a bit. If he really tolerated this without making any attempt at payback, then wouldn't that mean that the Yu clan was beneath the Ao clan? Thus, this was not a matter that could be settled with him simply saying that he would let things go, because this affected the competition between 2 different factions. Junior brother Han, you are indeed unusually strong, and there may be no one capable of standing against you in the spiritual ocean tier, but there are so many of us here now, so we are at the advantage in terms of numbers. Why don't you first release junior sister Zitai? The sect will naturally serve out justice for yourself and senior brother Yu. Another said. Ling Han laughed, but turned to look at Yu Kai-yu and said, Senior brother Yu, if the accusation that we attempted molest and rape was made solid, what would happen to us? There are 3 taboos in martial arts: defying one's parents, betraying one's master, and committing a sexual offense. Our Winter Moon sect has always strictly observed these 3 taboos, so if the accusation of rape was really made solid, the punishment would be execution. Yu Kai-yu said after some consideration. Ling Han's eyes turned cold, and said, I am actually someone nice. If you respect me, I will respect you as well. But I also remember my grudges very well. Whoever treats me badly, I will definitely avenge myself. Since you want me to die, then why should I allow you to live? These words were directed at Ao Zitai. Ao Zitai could not help but quiver, and said, Could it be that you actually dare to kill me? Junior brother Han, don't be rash. That, after all, is merely conjecture, Yu Kai-yu hurriedly said. Pooh! Yet Ling Han snatched away someone else's sword, and with a light scrape, blood gushed forth and Ao Zitai's throat was already slashed open. She stared at Ling Han in disbelief, one hand holding onto her throat, yet she was not able to stop the onsurge of blood at all. She had died just like that. She had merely come to stand up for her brothers, and planned to use her influence among the younger generation to forcibly remake Ling Han into a despicable character who would molest women. And by that time, public clamor would be able to obscure the actual truth. How would Ling Han be able to continue to stay in the Winter Moon sect? He would definitely have his cultivation crippled and be forced out of the sect. Even if events had exceeded her expectations in the later half, she was not the slightest bit anxious. Anyways, if one plan did not work, there was always another. But she had never thought that Ling Han would be such a decisive character, had actually killed her with a single slash. She was of the Ao clan. Why had Ling Han dared to do something like that? She would never know the reason. As the last signs of life left her body, she fell onto the ground with a pun, and her beautiful face, just like that, was stuck onto the dirt. His continuous sharp breaths were heard from all around. Then, a considerable number turned to stare at Ling Han with red eyes. "Want to fight?" "I am willing," Ling Han said calmly. He was especially angry, because he had just about managed to get some information about his mother, but was forcefully interrupted by Ao Zitai. Furthermore, his mother was currently imprisoned, and the cause for it was because the Ao clan was involved. Now that Ao Zitai was also planning to set him up, his killing intent was naturally overflowing. He entered the Winter Moon sect indeed to find out his mother's location, and indeed because he wanted to obtain the Thunder Battle armor, but this did not imply he was willing to submit to humiliation. He was someone who had been in the Heaven tier, and the Alchemy Emperor in his last life. How could his backbone be soft? In the worst-case scenario, he could give up on the Thunder Battle armor. Moreover, as long as he was able to become more powerful, how could he not be capable of crushing the Winter Moon sect and rescuing his mother? It was only that this plan would take longer, and he wanted to rescue his mother as soon as possible. "Han Lin!" At least a few dozen people roared in anger, eyes red, their killing intent sky-high. No matter what fault Ao Zitai had done, she did not deserve death. Now that their goddess had passed away, this made them extraordinarily outraged, and they were determined to crush Ling Han into dust. It was only now that Yukayu came back from his shock state, and he could not help but wipe away the cold sweat that had gathered on his forehead. This guy was really a little ancestor. He had actually killed Ao Zitai just like that. What could be done now? The Ao clan would definitely not let things go like that. But after only an instant, he made the decision to shield Ling Han with all his effort. The Yu clan and the Ao clan had been on fair terms 20 years ago, and had even advanced to the level that they wanted to ally their clans through marriage, but after Yu Hongchang's matter had happened, the relations between the two clans swiftly deteriorated. Currently, the two clans would oppose each other in all aspects and compete in everything, and the Yu clan was now obviously at disadvantage. If they were comparing the older generation, Ao Feng dominated over Xue Xian, and in the younger generation, those 7 sons of Ao family were all stronger than Yukayu, and the gap between the two clans was not small in any way. It was all thanks to the fact that their elders were at a tie, and the deciding factor was the ability of the spiritual infant tier. Thus, even if the younger generations of the Yu clan were not as strong, they were still able to stand on equal footing with the Ao clan. At least, this was true now, while the elder of the Yu clan was still alive. But the problem was, if the Yu clan continued to wither in this manner, or if the younger generation of the Ao clan completely developed, then the Yu clan would definitely lose in the competition between the two clans. The Yu clan had really put in enough effort. For example, Yukayu had obviously obtained more cultivation resources than the 7 sons of Ao family, but why was his cultivation still at the 8th layer of the spiritual ocean tier? That was because he had continued to suppress it, and did not make any attempt to break through yet, intending to solidify his foundation and trying his best to perfect his cultivation at the level of the spiritual ocean tier. Yukayu's talent was not too bad, but he was not so talented as to defy logic. Furthermore, he alone was standing against 7 opponents, so his chance of winning was really minuscule. Yet it was at this moment that Ling Han had appeared. His talent defied logic and he had the backing of an alchemist. More importantly, right from the start, he was already on the opposite side of the Ao clan. Thus, Yukayu wanted to befriend Ling Han. Who knew, perhaps he would become a strong weight on the power balance against the Ao clan in future. Now that Ling Han had killed Ao Zitai on the surface, he had made a life-or-death enmity with the Ao clan, but in truth, wasn't this a chance for the Yu clan? A chance for the Yu clan and Ling Han to become real allies. Chapter 351 AO Feng appears. Chapter 351 AO Feng appears. What are you planning to do? Yu Kaiyu exclaimed darkly. Since he had made his decision, he displayed the decisiveness that was characteristic of a member of a great clan. He killed junior sister Zitai. We will kill him to avenge her. The crowd shouted in fury. Insolence! Yu Kaiyu humphed coldly. Is the sect the kind of place that allows you all to have fights in private? It is naturally up to the sect to judge whether junior brother Han has committed a crime, so how could you all be allowed to make trouble? That's right. This is indeed something to be handled by the sect. A clear voice rang out, and all of a sudden, there was another person in the courtyard, and none of them actually managed to see how he had suddenly appeared. Of course, Ling Han was the exception. Greetings, Attendant AO. When the masses saw the newcomer, they all raised their clasped hands to pay their respects. Ling Han was a little surprised. So this was AO Feng? He turned his eyes to the newcomer, and saw that it was a man who looked to be in his 40s. He was quite tall and slender, his complexion as clear as jade, and looked extremely handsome. Furthermore, he had an elegant bearing, and could very easily make women fall for him. No wonder he could be a stud. His appearance and bearing were both well above average. Moreover, AO Feng was also unusually talented in martial arts, and already had 1 foot in the flower blossom tier by now. That was already over a dozen years ahead of the greatly talented and bold Rain Emperor, which was proof enough of his extraordinary ability. Of course, there were talented people in every generation, and among the 7 sons of AO family, at least AO Xinglai had already exceeded AO Feng when the latter was at his age, and set against the whole north region, Lu Yang, Xue Xian and Xue Yu were even more dominating. AO Feng's eyes paused on AO Zitai's body for quite a while. He had been a womanizer his whole life, with innumerable illegitimate children, and it was only these few years that he had exercised a bit of restraint. In truth, even he himself could not remember the names of every single one of his children. However, there were a few outstandingly talented children that were precious to him. One example was AO Xinglai and another was AO Zitai. A mere disciple who had just recently entered into the sect actually dared to kill his beloved daughter? The more outraged AO Feng was, the calmer his expression became. He said calmly, "It is a great breach of rules for a battle to commence in private within the sect. However, as an attendant, I probably have the right to handle this matter, don't I? Isn't that right, nephew Kaiyu?" The aura of the spiritual pedestal surged forth, and Yu Kaiyu erupted in an uncontrollable cold sweat. AO Feng already had 1 foot in the flower blossom tier and possessed a sliver of an immortal's aura. This made Yu Kaiyu feel as if there was a mountain weighing down on him. Even standing up was an exercise of willpower and force for him, but his legs were already uncontrollably shaking. How could he even speak now? However, it was at this moment that Ling Han stepped out and stood in front of Yu Kaiyu, taking this kind of tremendous pressure onto his own shoulders. Yu Kaiyu instantly felt lightened. He could not help but feel both thankful and worried, because no matter how much of a monster Ling Han was, he was also in the first layer of the spiritual ocean tier just like himself, so it was practically an impossibility for him to be able to take on the aura exuded from someone who was half a step away from the flower blossom tier. Yet Ling Han appeared extremely calm. AO Feng wanted to use his aura to suppress him, someone who had once been in the heaven tier. He had better try it again when he had reached the level of someone like Sword Emperor or Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden. He smiled calmly and asked, "What does Attendant AO plan to do to me?" Hiss. The crowd inhaled sharply at this and could not help but be secretly impressed by his courage. In front of someone who was half a step away from the flower blossom tier, Ling Han could still be so calm. He had to be exceedingly brave, and this point alone was worth them all giving him a thumbs up. A life for a life, naturally, the punishment is execution, AO Feng said calmly as well. He was half a step away from the flower blossom tier, and possessed absolute authority here. Ling Han suddenly laughed loudly and said, "AO Zitai plotted and intended to frame and set up both myself and senior brother Yu. I am the champion of the open trials this time round, and with my talent, it would be no issue for me to break through to the spiritual infant tier in future. Senior brother Yu is grand elder Yu's great-grandson. Who are we? And how very important are we to the sect? Yet Aoz Tai actually wanted to frame us and accused us as despicable, lewd villains. Such a person, shouldn't she be executed? When everyone heard this, they could not help but twitch as they all shared the same thought. They had seen some who had really thick skin, but they had never seen someone who would praise themselves to the extent that Ling Han had. He actually dared to exaggerate, and claimed that he would definitely break through to the spiritual infant tier in future. This kind of boast was really mad. However, those who had actually witnessed Ling Han's battles during daytime were nodding in agreement. He, someone who was merely in the first layer of the spiritual ocean tier, could actually defeat all the 7 sons of Ao family. This guy's talent in martial arts could only be described with the word monstrous. Furthermore, he was already in the first layer of the spiritual ocean tier at the mere age of 19, and this kind of achievement could already be counted within the top 100 in the history of the Winter Moon sect. And among these 100 people, there were 56 that managed to break through to the spiritual infant tier in the end, and there were 31 that had also reached the 9th layer of the flower blossom tier. As for the remaining 13, it was either that they had vanished amongst the crowd, or died at a young age. Otherwise, they would have at least broken through to the flower blossom tier. History had already proved that Ling Han indeed had that kind of potential, and was not merely boasting. Ao Feng was stunned. He had never imagined that Ling Han would actually still be able to speak so much with such a sure tone when he was under the pressure of his aura. However, he was not angered, because he possessed absolute power. What need was there for him to get angry when he had such power? I don't care, I only know that you've killed my daughter. No one can kill anyone from the Ao clan, no one! He moved, and Hong, a sharp brightness arose from behind him. His martial intent was at full power, forming what seemed to be a world of its own. It was within this short instant that multiple thoughts streaked through Ling Han's mind. Should he have the Black Tower instill power into him, or draw out the demon birth sword, and kill this enemy directly? Or he could duck into the Black Tower and temporarily avoid confronting him directly, because he very much wanted to leave Ao Feng to Ling Dongxing himself to deal with. However, before he had come to a decision, he saw a huge crimson palm strike forth and parry Ao Feng's attack. Humph, the Winter Moon sect is not your private kingdom where you can do as you like. Hong, a violent power surged forth, forming a brilliant light. When the light had died out, another man had stood in front of Ling Han. He looked to be in his 40s as well, with a sturdy hair and his black hair fluttering around him. He withdrew his fist, folded his arms behind him, and said, I think that the fault lies with Zi Tai. As for Han Lin, he can only be claimed to be a bit too rash, so it would be enough for him to get a little black mark. Dad! Yu Kai-yu immediately exclaimed in delight and surprise. What made him even happier was the fact that his father had obviously made the same decision as he had, that was to shield Ling Han to the best of their ability. Greetings, Attendant Yu! Everyone once again greeted. The person that had come this time was, of course, Xue Xian. Ao Feng looked at Xue Xian coldly and asked, Then my daughter has died for nothing? Ho ho, senior brother Ao, you have my condolences. Xue Xian said without any sincerity in his words. Although Zi Tai has gone too far, but we should honor the dead. Thus, there is no longer any need to pursue her fault in this matter. Ao Feng was so angry that he looked like he wanted to breathe fire. Then, he said coldly, Today, if this boy does not die, I will definitely not let matters go. You have so many sons and daughters anyway, so it's not such a big issue if a few of them die. Xue Xian mumbled. What? Ao Feng instantly jumped up and raised a palm in a strike at Xue Xian, which attack transformed into 8 eerily sharp blades. He was a swordsman, so even if he did not have a sword in his hands, every move he made was filled with sword intent. When they heard Xue Xian's words, quite many felt some sympathy for Ao Feng, and secretly thought that it was rumored that Xue Xian was a brainless and straightforward character. The rumors were indeed true. How could he say such words in front of everyone? Chapter 352 Punishment Decided. Chapter 352 Punishment Decided. Xue Xian raised a palm to parry this strike and created 7 flashes of qi that transformed into 7 giant crimson palms that flew forth towards those 8 flashes of sword qi. Pu. The sword qi and the gigantic palms cancelled each other out. However, as Feng had formed his 8th flash of sword qi, he was at an obvious advantage. The additional flash of sword qi continued its advance, forcing Xue Xian to dodge it. This was an advantage born from a deeper comprehension of Tao. They had shot out their attacks which had the same amount of force behind them at the same time, yet the one who had a stronger comprehension would still have a more powerful attack. This was still only the gap when it was a clash between 7 flashes and 8 flashes of qi. If it was a clash of 1 flash against 8 flashes, or even 0 against 8 flashes of qi, then the power gap would be as huge and overwhelming as the gap between heaven and earth. That was why those who managed to form 7 flashes of qi could be labeled as rulers. Thankfully, the gap between 7 and 8 flashes of qi was not especially obvious, and Xue Xian was not too far beneath Feng in cultivation. As a result, though he would still be at a disadvantage against Feng, he was still able to contend with the latter for quite a while. This was the Winter Moon sect, and if there really erupted a fierce battle between them, then one of the higher ranks would definitely appear to stop them. Xue Xian, are you sure you want to be my enemy? Feng suddenly jumped up in fury. I am currently extremely angry. One of my daughters died, and I want to kill this bastard. Xue Xian shook his head and said, I haven't sparred with you for quite a long time, so I would like to see how far you've advanced now and whether you've degraded or not. Feng withdrew his furious expression, took a deep breath, and said, You have never been able to rival me. That was the case in the past, now, and in future, it will still be so. He widened his eyes, and there actually appeared 2 flashes of cold light that streaked out and tore through the open air as if they were real blades, creating power ripples. Xue Xian did not dare to be careless. Feng was indeed superior to him in power, and though this gap was not very large, if the former really put all his effort into a battle and he still proceeded carelessly, then there would be a great possibility that he would be defeated within a few moves. Come on then, he said without a care. When elites battled, they would naturally contend with their real battle prowess, but one should not underestimate the power of words. This was a kind of stance, so it could not be weak. Hung! It was at this moment that a powerful pressure pressed down on the area. An elder arrived by stepping on air. As his eyes swept over the group, his imposing gaze made both Feng and Xue Xian instantly cease their battle. This was an elite of the flower blossom tier, and as his immortal aura swept over all of them, it made every single one of them feel utter reverence, as if they were facing a god. Ling Han glanced over. This elite of the flower blossom tier was exactly He Jingqiu, who had gone to Rain Country some time ago and fought a battle with the Rain Emperor, but in the end was chased out. And though they were both half a step away from the flower blossom tier, the Rain Emperor was much more forceful than Feng. There was no way to compare the two. One was only the attendant of a great sect, and no matter how much power he had and how many disciples he had authority over, ultimately, he could not compare to one who was the emperor of a whole country. Furthermore, the Rain Emperor was the kind of dominating ruler that appeared once in a few thousand years, and he had made full use of the power of the nation to its extreme. He could not help but wonder how the Rain Emperor was now. With the latter's intelligence and outstanding courage, he should be close to breaking through to the flower blossom tier, shouldn't he? Once he had broken through to the flower blossom tier, he would be able to add an additional 200 years to his lifespan. The Rain Emperor was only 60 years old now, and in terms of a lifespan of about 300 years, that was equivalent to about 20 years old of an ordinary lifespan, so he was in the prime of his youth. Perhaps it would not take a long time for him to hear rumors of a young elite gradually appearing, rushing through the north region, or even entering the other 3 regions and prefecture, displaying his elegant bearing and powerful presence as much as he desired. "In this matter, the sect leader has already made a decision," He Jingchu said emotionlessly. "It was Ao Zitai who had used a scheme to set up one of our disciples first, and now that she has been killed by Han Lin, she deserved it for her crime. However, Han Lin killed her in private, which is also a breach of the rules of the sect, so his punishment is to enter the Dark Devil Forest and collect 7 stalks of fiery sun grass in 1 year's time before he will be allowed to return." That was the end of the matter. Everyone was shocked. That was a daughter of the Ao clan, and furthermore, she was not an insignificant illegitimate child, but a genius and talented princess. Yet Han Lin was only to go to the Dark Devil Forest and collect herbs. Wasn't this punishment a little too light? However, there were some who were wearing cold smirks. That was the fiery sun grass they were talking about here. It could only be found in the deepest parts of the Dark Devil Forest, and there would be demonic beasts of the flower blossom tier there. Even an elite of the spiritual pedestal tier would not dare to carelessly enter that part of the forest. Moreover, the fiery sun grass was an extremely rare herb. Collecting 1 stalk would take a very long time, and if one wanted to collect 7 stalks, the time needed would be overwhelming. If one was lucky, that would take about 1 or 2 months. But if one was unlucky, then he'd best prepare himself to stay there for about 1.5 years. During this long period of time, how high were his chances to encounter a demonic beast in the flower blossom tier? Thus, while this was not a definite death sentence, it was still extremely dangerous. It was obvious. There was no way that a member of the younger generation of the Ao clan could die for nothing, but in this matter, it was still Ao Zitai who was in the wrong. Furthermore, this involved Yukai as well. Thus, the elder of the Ao clan must have interfered, which had led to this kind of punishment in the end. "Junior brother Han, I shall go with you," Yukai immediately declared, extremely loyal. He did indeed have this kind of character, and added with the fact that they had experienced a hardship together just now, he made the choice to go with Ling Han without any hesitation. Ling Han nodded to Yukai, yet wondered internally whether he should really enter the Dark Devil Forest. After all, he was only holding on to the false identity of Han Lin, so there was no need for him to take the risk just to maintain this false cover. He decided not to worry about that for the moment, and see how things went. Anyways, he had nothing much to occupy his time currently. Ao Feng humphed and stared for a very long time at Ling Han's face before he finally turned and left. There was nothing else he could do now. The elder of the Ao clan had obviously agreed to this final decision, and no matter how arrogant he was, he dared not oppose a decision made by their clan elder. The Dark Devil Forest? At most within 3 months, he would definitely be able to break through to the flower blossom tier, and by that time, he would be able to charge into the deeper parts of Dark Devil Forest, find Ling Han, and kill him. It was only another 2 or 3 months. He did not believe in the slightest that Ling Han would be able to procure 7 stalks of fiery sun grass in such a short period of time. The crowd dispersed and went their separate ways. There was naturally someone who carried away Ao Zitai's body. Moreover, the passing of this goddess of the Winter Moon sect had broken the hearts of who knew how many young men, so everyone wanted to have a moment of silence. Han Lin, within 3 days you must leave the Winter Moon sect. If you dare to escape secretly, the sect will definitely search the whole world and apprehend you, He Jingchu said, without knowing that the person in front of him was precisely that criminal that he had gone over to the Rain country to apprehend some time ago. When he had finished speaking, he immediately turned around and left. With his identity as one in the flower blossom tier, he of course disdained spending pointlessly time on talking with a minor character like Ling Han. Junior brother Han, we're in trouble this time, Yukai said, his brow wrinkled in a frown. He naturally knew the difficulty of collecting 7 stalks of fiery sun grass. Ling Han frowned as well, and just when Yukai thought that he too was troubled, he heard Ling Han say, "Who knows if I would still be able to get the thunder battle armor tomorrow?" Yukai almost stumbled. Things were already like this, and you are actually still talking about the thunder battle armor? He said in irritation. Compared with entering the Dark Devil Forest to collect herbs, the Thunder Battle Armor is nothing. Ling Han smiled and said, "With the Thunder Battle Armor, wouldn't it be safer for us?" That sounded very reasonable. Yu Kaiyu scratched his head and kept feeling like there was something off with that logic. Chapter 353 Cripple. Chapter 353 Cripple. On the second day, Ling Han indeed still obtained the Thunder Battle Armor, which made him extremely pleased. Firstly, the Thunder Battle Armor was indeed a very valuable treasured tool, and years ago, Xue Xian had worn it all day, treating it like it was a priceless treasure. Secondly, it was precisely because this was a spirit tool one of his old acquaintances had used before Ling Han felt very nostalgic. He was reborn after 10,000 years, and all around him, the people he met were all strangers to him. Thus, when he saw an old possession of someone whom he had known years ago, how could he not be overwhelmed by emotions? Then he'd just go to the Dark Devil Forest. Ling Han had made his decision. The reason why he had come to the Winter Moon sect was to find out where his mother was, bring trouble to the Ao clan, and in passing, steal some good stuff. These three motives were practically fulfilled. He had collected a considerable number of spiritual herbs, and had even obtained the Thunder Battle Armor. He had defeated all the 7 sons of Ao family, and killed Ao Zitai. Lastly, since Yu Kaiyu was going with him, then he would naturally have a lot of time to probe for information. This cousin and his uncle had more or less the same personality. They were very forthright and straightforward people, and weren't really ones to keep secrets. Thus, after he obtained the Thunder Battle Armor, Ling Han decided to set out. Yu Kaiyu went with him, and looked to be in high spirits at that. It seemed that this guy had only left the sect for a trial twice, and even during these 2 times, he had not gone too far. Thus, he had never really left on a long journey away from the sect. Ling Han sighed. This guy said he wanted to help him, but the best he could hope for was that he wouldn't hold him back. He and Yu Kaiyu set out together, and descended the mountain. Ling Han! However, they had just arrived at the foot of the mountain when they suddenly heard a voice filled with venom ring out behind them. This voice was Feng Yan. Ling Han did not turn around. He was now Han Lin, and not Ling Han. "You actually still dare to come here, die!" Feng Yan roared furiously, drawing his saber and delivered a strike at Ling Han. Xiao, xiao, xiao. There actually appeared 6 flashes of saber chi that transformed into 6 cold, bright, sharp blades that charged towards Ling Han. This guy had improved very fast. At that time in the Rain Country, he had only formed 4 flashes of saber chi, but now, he had shockingly reached the level of 6 flashes. Looks like after Ling Han crippled one of his legs, he had received a huge provocation, which boosted his comprehension in his saber arts. Shua, cold chi spread throughout the air, and the severe, fierce saber chi streaked through the air, making for a very terrifying spectacle. "Are you crazy?" Because he was standing together with Ling Han, Yu Kaiyu was naturally in the vicinity of this attack as well. Furthermore, the name that Feng Yan had called out was incomprehensible. He naturally would not think that it had any relation to Ling Han, and only thought that they had encountered a maniac, so he immediately delivered his own punch. His arms immediately transformed and looked like they were made of black iron. Martial intent transformed into patterns that shone on his arms, and 6 flashes of fist chi shot forth. Pun! The fist parried the saber's blade and the fist chi clashed with the saber chi, canceling each other out. Feng Yan's gaze tensed. He said, "Who are you, and why are you defending this person?" Yu Kaiyu glanced over and could not help but be astonished, because even though this person was a cripple who had obviously lost one of his legs, he now had a prosthetic attached, and his pants leg revealed a bit of a white-colored metal, which had a circular shape and stood on the ground. His eyes swept over the symbol on Feng Yan's sleeve, and he could not help but be even more astonished as he mumbled, "When has our Winter Moon sect started to take in cripples? Furthermore, this cripple looks really powerful." He was straightforward in his speech, and when he said this, cripple, he was only saying things as they were, so in truth, he did not have any intention to insult him. However, when Feng Yan heard this, This, Cripple, sounded as if it was filled with malice. You are seeking death! Feng Yan's eyes sharpened, and he was just about to deliver another attack. Ling Han turned around and said, Do you have some kind of problem? You plan to jump into a battle right from the moment you see us. Do you have no recognition for the rules of the sect? Feng Yan paused. When he saw Ling Han's back, it was 100% like his great enemy's. But why was there such a huge difference the moment he turned around? This youth, or rather young man, did not have an outstanding appearance, and there was a great difference between his face and Ling Han's. But why did his voice give him such a familiar feeling, and his back look so much like Ling Han's? Furthermore, this expression, the tone that he used to speak, was filled with the feeling that he detested. I was mistaken. Multiple thoughts streaked through his head, yet in the end, he only said this. Crazy! Yu glared angrily at him. He was the eldest grandson of the Yu clan, yet for some unfathomable reason, he was attacked, which made him very displeased. But when he recalled the mission that he and Ling Han had, he did not currently have the time to call Feng Yan to accounts, so he said, I have something to do now, and I will deal with you when I come back. As he spoke, he tugged Ling Han and planned to leave. When he saw Ling Han's back, killing intent once again appeared on Feng Yan's face. He turned and looked at a disciple who was standing at the roadside and asked, Who are these two? Who are you, and why should I tell you? That disciple asked with his head held high, very displeased with Feng Yan's attitude. Feng Yan's eyes sharpened and a terrifying aura exuded from him, which immediately made that disciple shiver in fear. He hurriedly answered, The slightly older one is Yu Yu, senior brother Yu. He is Grand Elder Yu's great-grandson, and the other one is called Han Lin. He has just entered the sect 2 days ago, but he is the kind to attract trouble. He has just arrived, and has already killed Attendant Ao's beloved daughter, and now has been punished to enter the Dark Devil Forest to collect fiery sun grass. Feng Yan's right index finger suddenly flicked, and his killing intent spread. Han Lin, Ling Han, wasn't that precisely the other way round? Furthermore, he was a newly entered disciple, yet was so outrageously bold that he dared to kill the daughter of an attendant. This was very similar to Ling Han's personality. He immediately leaped up and left, heading towards the White Cloud Peak. This was where all the higher ranks of the Winter Moon sect lived. If one wanted to enter here, one at least had to be in the spiritual pedestal tier, or be the personal disciple of an elite of the spiritual infant tier or the flower blossom tier. Not even Yu was qualified to live here. Feng Yan found the place where the information for the sect's disciples were recorded, directly drew out the personal token of Grand Elder Xue, and made the request to look at Ling Han's information. Suspicions were still only suspicions, after all. He wanted solid proof. Han Lin, 19 years old. He's from Return Origin Mountain, and was at the first layer of the spiritual ocean tier upon his entry into the sect. As Feng Yan read, a sliver of a cold smirk appeared at his lips, and he said, Send someone to the Return Origin Mountain to verify this person's information. Young Master Yan, isn't that a bit of making a big fuss over a small issue? Do as I say, or do I need to ask my master to speak with you? I wouldn't dare. When Feng Yan left, his expression was dark. Han Lin, if you are really Ling Han, I will definitely have you die in the Winter Moon sect because you have sought your own death. Since you've concealed your identity, when I kill you, I would have only killed a minor character named Han Lin. Hang. Ling Han and Yu set out, and headed towards Sea Breeze City. It was unknown how long they would spend on this trip to the Dark Devil Forest, so naturally, he had to go and get Lu Yutong and the others first. Anyways, Yu did not know anyone of their group. To avoid being targeted by Ao Feng, Xue Xian even escorted them personally, and he only returned to the Winter Moon sect after they had left the boundaries of the Yulong Mountains without spotting any sign of Ao Feng. That was because even if Ao Feng's daughter had died, it was no matter, since he still had a considerable number of children left. But in his case, he only had this one son. The two of them arrived at the Sea Breeze City, an extremely large city. It was a dozen times larger than even the imperial city of the Rain country. The city walls that were over 100 meters tall cast a long shadow on the ground, and the whole city seemed like a colossal beast crawling. I need to go and find a few friends first, Ling Han said. All right, Yu Kaiyu said without thinking too much about it, not worried that Ling Han could sell him off. Chapter 354 Who's Better at Picking Up Girls? Chapter 354 Who's Better at Picking Up Girls? Ling Han soon found the inn that Lu Yutong and the others were staying at. Coincidentally, Lu Yutong and Li Xichan were coming down from upstairs together right at that moment. They looked like they were planning to have something to eat. It was almost noon, so the time was just right for lunch. Wah, two great beauties! Yu Kaiyu instantly blew a whistle. Ling Han rolled his eyes and said, They have a silk veil over their faces, and you can still see that they are beauties? Hee, you should trust my eyes. Since I've said that they're beauties, then they're definitely beauties. Yu Kaiyu patted Ling Han's shoulder with a grin and said, You just wait here, and let Big Brother you show you a few tricks to pick up a girl. Ling Han's expression became a little strange, and he asked, You want to pick the two of them up? One would not be too few, and two would not be too many. Learn a bit. AI, you're so tanned, and though you don't look ugly, you're still too far away from being handsome. Looks like you won't be able to learn Big Brother Yu's wisdom, Yu Kaiyu said, shaking his head. Ling Han laughed and asked, Aren't you worried that you would pierce my fragile heart by saying that? As a human being, the most important thing is to face up to reality. You indeed don't look very appealing, and there is too much of a gap between the handsome, dashing looks that your Big Brother Yu has. Forget it, let's not talk about this. You first observe the skill your Big Brother Yu has in picking up girls. Then Yu Kaiyu took big strides towards Lu Yutong and the girls. However, in a short while, he returned gloomily, looking downhearted. How was it? Were you rebuffed? Ling Han glanced over and saw that Hunyo was still waving her claws and baring her teeth at Yu Kaiyu, but when Ling Han caught her eye, the little girl couldn't help but tilt her head and look him over. This little girl really had terrifying instincts. After he had changed his appearance, even Lu Yutong and Li Xichan had not noticed the slightest oddness about him, but Hunyo seemed to have discovered something was strange about him, but had yet to confirm her suspicions. Don't remind me. Let's drink. No one is going home without getting drunk. Yu Kaiyu looked as if he had had his heart broken. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, Why don't I show off a few of my tricks as well and let you see what is really the best trick to pick up a girl? Ha ha! Yu Kaiyu naturally did not believe his words, and laughed sarcastically at him. If you're able to sit with them, then I'll be convinced. What's so difficult about that? Ling Han clapped a hand on his shoulder and said, You go find us a table first, and wait while I go and bring them over. Pooh! Yu Kaiyu choked in laughter and said, Junior Brother Han, Junior Brother Han. I am very impressed with your battle prowess, but your ability at making boasts seems to be even more awesome. All right, if you can bring them over, I'll call you Big Brother from now on. That's what you said, so you better not regret it, Ling Han said, shaking his head. Yes, that's what I said. Go on then. Yu Kaiyu looked like he was waving him off in a farewell. Without another word, Ling Han walked towards the table that Lu Yutong and Li Xichan were seated at, whereas Yu Kaiyu was watching from one side while looking for an empty table to sit at. Naturally, a waiter soon approached and asked for his order. How big could the dining hall in an inn be? With a few steps, Ling Han had arrived in front of the table that Lu Yutong and Li Xichan were sitting at. My two misses, may I sit down? Ling Han asked with a smile. Lu Yutong and Li Xichan simultaneously looked displeased at this. Even if they had veiled their faces, he could still see their slender brows were wrinkled in a frown. It was not that they had never seen skirt chasers before, but it was the first time they had seen one that was brave enough to directly sit at their table with them. No, Li Xichan said coldly. Meanwhile, Lu Yutong directly stretched out a slender, jade finger and pointed in the direction of the main door. Her meaning was obvious, and that was for him to get lost. Yu Kaiyu laughed loudly. He was rebuffed previously, and so naturally did not believe that Ling Han, a guy who did not look in any way outstanding and additionally was so tan, could succeed. Otherwise, wouldn't that imply that his charms were too inferior and that he could not measure up to even Ling Han? Ling Han was not discouraged. He turned to Hu Niu and asked, "Little beauty, may I sit beside you?" Hu Niu did not say another word and directly moved her behind, eking out space on what had originally been a long bench that could only accommodate one person. Pooh! This time, it was Lu Yutong and Li Si-chan's turn to choke. They had originally thought that even if Hu Niu did not explode, she would still ignore this stranger. They had even prepared themselves to restrain Hu Niu together so as to ensure that the little girl did not hurt anyone. Yet they had never imagined that the little girl would have this kind of reaction. Had Hu Niu been bewitched? As the two girls looked dumbstruck, Ling Han had already sat down. He knew that Hu Niu had already recognized him. He laughed and teased Hu Niu. The little girl was very cooperative, and very soon, she squeezed into his arms and acted spoiled. You could not help but drop the chopsticks he was holding and his face twitched uncontrollably. Damn, he had taken everything into account, yet left out a little girl from his calculations. Young beauties indeed would not like Ling Han's type, tanned and with rather ordinary looks, but what would a little girl know about what a handsome man looked like? He never imagined that his junior brother Han was so good with kids. Thankfully, he had only sat at the same table with the two young beauties, but it was practically impossible for him to bring them over. There was no need for him to address Ling Han as big brother. Phew, he almost met with an unexpected failure. Lu Yutong and Li Si-chan were both very baffled. Hu Niu extremely rejected the approach of any strangers, and if it was not because for Ling Han, even they would not be able to get close to this little girl. Yet why was it that an unfamiliar man was able to make Hu Niu act so defenseless, and act so spoiled and warm as if the man was Ling Han? Could it be? The eyes of the two girls lit up at the same time. They both knew that Ling Han had changed his appearance, and went to the Winter Moon sect, so did that mean that this young man in front of them was Ling Han left for so long, and not play with Niu? It was at this moment that they heard Hu Niu say with much displeasure, as she bit Ling Han's hand to express her dissatisfaction. Indeed! The two girls finally understood, and secretly felt ashamed as well. They were both very deeply in love with Ling Han, yet they had not recognized their beloved when he was standing in front of them. On the other hand, Hu Niu was able to recognize him with a single look. How could they bear with that? Ling Han smiled faintly, tousled Hu Niu's hair, and said, "All right, I'll play more often with Niu in future." Hu Niu knew how to act spoiled, but would never throw an unreasonable tantrum. She immediately stopped frowning and gave Ling Han a very sweet smile. Fuck, was this little girl transformed from some kind of vixen? That was really too cunning of her. Like that, Ling Han would definitely feel apologetic and dote even more on this little girl. The two girls exchanged a look and could not help but feel alert in their minds. They definitely could not overlook Hu Niu just because she was little, because a little girl would very soon grow up to become a young girl. With Hu Niu's possessiveness, by that time, the two of them might not even be able to get within 10 meters of Ling Han. Ling Han nodded at the two girls and said, "My name now is Han Lin, and that guy over there is my cousin, but he does not know who I am. Come with me." Lu Yutong and Li Si-chan instantly looked shy, but they still stood up and followed Ling Han back to where Yu Kai-yu was sitting. The chopsticks that Yu Kai-yu had just picked up not too long ago fell back onto the table. His face twitched, and it looked like his eyes were practically popping out of his head. How was this possible? They were really conned over by this guy. No matter how he looked at this junior brother Han, there wasn't any particularly outstanding part to him, was there? Or did the women nowadays prefer the ordinary tan type? Chapter 355 Information about Mother. Chapter 355 Information about Mother. Dark Angel _ Ling Han sat down, holding Hu Niu in his arms. The little girl was acting spoiled and clinging to him without any intention of coming down from his arms. Meanwhile, Lu Yutong and Li Si-chan sat on either side of him. The four of them coincidentally occupied all four sides of the table. Senior brother, you, looks like you will have to change how you address me in the future, Ling Han said, laughing. Yu Kaiyu felt like he was about to go crazy. He turned to Li Si-chan and said, Has this guy promised you some benefits to make you sit here? Let me tell you, this guy is a liar. He's both poor and ugly. To save his face as a senior brother, he did not care for anything else anymore and began to disparage Ling Han's character. Li Si-chan took off her face veil, and instantly, her delicate features were revealed. It was as if she herself was a deity, pleasing to anyone who saw her. She smiled faintly and said, I would have to disappoint senior brother Yu. I'm here of my own accord. Lu Yutong was not to be outdone, either, and she similarly removed her face veil and said, So am I. The reason why they had worn face veils was simply because they had not wanted to attract unnecessary trouble with their outstanding beauty, but now that Ling Han had returned, there was naturally nothing for them to be afraid of. Yu Kaiyu could not help but gape with his mouth wide open. He had long foreseen that these two girls were great beauties, but still had not expected that they would be beautiful to this level. They were not in the least bit inferior to Aoz Tai in terms of beauty. Thankfully, he was not the kind of man who would be completely unable to move upon seeing a beautiful girl. He very quickly returned to his senses, gave Ling Han a thumbs up, and said, You're awesome. I'm convinced. Hee, don't you continue teasing senior brother Yu anymore, Lu Yutong said to Ling Han. Yu Kaiyu stared blankly for a moment before he immediately understood, and said, So the two of them are your friends. Ling Han laughed loudly and said, Senior brother Yu is finally clever for once. I was just thinking, how could your charms be so powerful that you're able to abduct two great beauties upon your first meeting, so it appears that you know each other. Yu Kaiyu shook his head repeatedly, but also heaved out a breath of relief. It was not that he was not as charming as Ling Han, but there was another reason for his defeat. Furthermore, since they had known each other early on, then the bet they had made should of course not be taken seriously. Ling Han was also just joking around with Yu Kaiyu. He turned to look at Lu Yutong and asked, Where are Big Brother Guang, Qin Yi, and Wu Jiao? Wu Jiao and Qin Yi have already eaten, but Big Brother Guang... Li Si-chan paused slightly. He seems to have suffered some kind of blow, and has looked dispirited for quite a few days already. Ling Han nodded and said, I'll go take a look at him later. However, the important thing now is to make senior brother Yu drunk. Why do you want to make me drunk? Yu Kaiyu asked very innocently. Is it not worth getting drunk for the sake of seeing two such beautiful girls? Ling Han asked with a smile. Hee, then let's get drunk. Yu Kaiyu was an unrestrained person in the first place, and those with straightforward personalities usually tended to like drinking. Thus, he immediately smacked the table, and called out, Waiter, get us some good wine. However, his lack of restraint did not persist for too long. With the repeated encouragements to drink from Ling Han and the others, he was soon completely drunk. He was swaying on his seat, and could not even distinguish how many people were on Ling Han's side. Ling Han reserved a room and helped Yu Kaiyu inside. He wanted to continue to probe for information for his mother's location. My aunt is imprisoned in the Black Water Prison. Now that Yu Kaiyu was drunk, he could not keep any secrets at all. He immediately answered when asked, which made Ling Han shake his head. In future, he should either keep him ignorant of any important matters, or ensure that Yu Kaiyu would not get drunk. Otherwise, it was as if this guy's mouth had no closing, and would spill everything out. Where is the Black Water Prison? And what kind of environment is that? Ling Han asked. At the same time, he felt anger. His mother was actually held in a prison, which made him almost go berserk and rage. The Black Water Prison is where the sect imprisons criminals. The majority of the inmates are enemies of our sect, but there are also disciples who have betrayed the sect. Yu Kaiyu shook his head dizzily. When I was little, I could still visit Aunt, but those bastards from the Ao clan kept squeezing us out. It was only 3 years ago that Aunt was imprisoned into the Black Water Prison, and from then on, I could no longer visit Aunt. Woo, my pitiful aunt. She is forced apart from her husband and child, and has been imprisoned in a place with complete darkness. These bastards from the Ao clan, when I reach the spiritual infant tier, I'll strangle each one I see. Ling Han nodded. This cousin was on his side. How are the defenses of the Black Water prison? You want to break into the prison? That's impossible. Yu Kaiyu shook his head repeatedly, as if he wanted to shake his head off his shoulders. There are 2 elites of the Flower Blossom tier who take turns to stand guard there, and even a fly would not be able to fly in without their knowledge. Ling Han could not help but tap the table in thought. It looked like that he would at least need to have the battle prowess of the Flower Blossom tier before he would be able to break into the Black Water prison and rescue his mother. Damn, he obviously knew that his mother was currently suffering in prison, yet he could only sit by helplessly and watch. Yu Kaiyu did not have too bad of a drunken disposition. He was not the type to behave wildly when drunk, and very soon, he had started snoring loudly. Ling Han walked out of the room and went to find Liu Tong and the others. Zhu Wujiu and Qin Yi were already aware that he had come over, and had been waiting for him for some time. Ling Han asked about their cultivation progress, drew out the returned spirit pills and passed them to them. He had never been a miser to his own people. Later, I will teach you some new martial arts techniques. You will only deserve the name of elites after you have strengthened your foundations in these techniques, Ling Han said. Since these few people were going to follow him, he naturally had to ensure that their battle prowess would improve. Ling Han then went to see Guan Yuan. That this originally very rough and brash guy would actually close himself up in his room like a girl was indeed quite strange. He pushed open the door and entered, and saw Guan Yuan was sitting vacantly, his thoughts seeming to be far away. Big brother Guang! Ling Han stretched out a hand and waved it in front of him. It was only later that Guan Yuan reacted. When he spotted Ling Han, he first experienced a scare, then looked alert before asking him doubtfully. Ling Han? It's me. Ling Han nodded. What's wrong with you? What are you thinking of that has entranced you so? Guan Yuan hesitated for a while. He looked like he both wanted to speak, yet also seemed as if he didn't know where to start. In the end, he sighed and said, I met a person. An old lover? Ling Han asked, smiling. Otherwise, he would not need to look so vacant. In this world, perhaps only the word love would induce such torment upon one. Guan Yuan laughed bitterly and said, It's my old lover's man. This kind of development did not seem to be very wonderful. Now that Guan Yuan had brought up the topic, it seemed as if he wanted to vent the frustration he was feeling, and could no longer keep it inside anymore. He began to talk non-stop. When I was still young and came out of Rain Country, I journeyed around in the North region in search of a way to become stronger. During that period, I met 2 people. They were both loose cultivators. The 3 of us formed our own group and journeyed together all the while, experiencing life and death together. One was called Duan Jingji and the other was called Nong Qingyu. Duan Jingji and I were brothers, but both of us fell for Qingyu simultaneously. To avoid damaging our brotherhood, we agreed to have a martial arts competition, and whoever lost would automatically withdraw. In that half-year's time, I cultivated madly, and truly believed that I could defeat Duan Jingji. However, just a few days before our martial arts competition, Qingyu came and told me that she has made her decision and chose Duan Jingji. Thus, I naturally could only withdraw. However, not too long after, when Duan Jingji was drunk, I found out that he had used underhanded means and gotten Qingyu, forcing her to have no choice but to choose him. My fury could not be restrained, and I gave Duan Jingji a severe thrashing. Then I went to find Qingyu, and told her I did not care about the matter between her and Duan Jingji as long as she agreed to leave with me. However, she did not agree. Downhearted, I decided to return to the Rain Country. In a flash, close to 20 years had passed. A few days ago, I actually encountered Duan Jingji, yet he actually told me that Qingyu has been dead for 3 years. Chapter 356 Memory Crystal. Chapter 356 Memory Crystal. Ling Han considered the matter for a moment, then asked, You suspect that Qingyu had not died naturally? Qin Yu's talent in martial arts exceeded even mine and Duan Jingji's, so how could she have possibly died from illness? Guan Yuan shook his head immediately. I am currently in the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier, and Duan Jingji has even broken through to the spiritual pedestal tier. Then no matter what, Qin Yu would at least have been in the spiritual ocean tier 3 years ago. How could a martial artist in the spiritual ocean tier fall ill and die from illness? Indeed, once a martial artist had broken through to the element gathering tier, they would fall ill only in very rare circumstances. With origin power to protect their bodies, they would not be affected by ordinary ailments. Unless they were poisoned or injured by another, they would definitely live healthily all the way until they died of old age. Since you have suspicions, why don't you go and get to the bottom of the matter? Ling Han asked. I fear remembering her when I see things related to her, and am afraid that the long-suppressed old affections would emerge again, Guan Yuan said, shaking his head. Ling Han laughed loudly and asked, How are you any better than that if you continue like this? Where does that Duan Jingji live now? And he settled here 7 years ago, and has developed quite well since. The Duan clan can be considered a considerably powerful party in the Sea Breeze City, with many elites of the spiritual ocean tier under their banner, Guan Yuan said. This was also one of the reasons why he had not made his way to the Duan residence. That was because if he made an official visit, he would not be received, and if he sneaked in, with so many elites in the residence, should he be caught red-handed, how embarrassing would that be in front of his old love rival? Ling Han broke out into a smile and said, That's all right. We'll go take a look tonight, and conclude one of your preoccupations. Guan Yuan thought the matter over and sighed, but did not refuse. He indeed very much wanted to know how Nong Qin Yu had actually died. Otherwise it felt as if he had a heavy stone weighing down on his heart. This matter has caused him to be unable to eat well or sleep well, and there were even signs that his cultivation was degrading these days. After taking a look at all the members of his group, Ling Han entered the Black Tower. He wanted to study the Thunder battle armor closely. This battle armor looked like it was a vest. It did not have sleeves, and looked like it could only protect one's torso. It was also made from a material Ling Han could not identify. It was made from multiple silver-colored metal plates woven together with a metallic thread. Upon close examination, every single metallic plate had a pattern on it. They were all different from each other, and looked a bit like the lettering on the indestructible Heaven Scroll, but also looked as if they were drawings. If that was really the case, then the Thunder battle armor would have come from a very important background. It was possible that it was not any mere spirit tool, but could possibly be a god tool that had come from the realm of gods. However, this battle armor was extremely severely damaged. There was a hole on the chest part, and when he compared it, it was precisely the spot lying over the right side of the chest, where the heart was. In other words, someone had worn the Thunder battle armor yet had his heart pierced with a single strike from his opponent. The wearer had naturally died, whereas the battle armor experienced fundamental damage. There was now no one capable of reviving the battle armor, but because the material it was forged from was definitely level 9 or perhaps even level 10, it could not be penetrated by any kind of weapon. Thus, should one wear it, it could still be effective as a protective covering, which could be considered of little value when compared to its real worth. If that hadn't been the case, how could the Winter Moon sect possibly use it as a prize? However, it was originally arranged to be won by the 7 sons of Ao family, and this was also the result from the hard-working efforts of the elder of the Ao clan. Yet, unexpectedly, it had fallen into Ling Han's grasp in the end. Has the tool spirit vanished completely? Ling Han injected his divine sense into the battle armor, and indeed, there was no sign of life from this spirit tool. The tool's spirit no longer existed within. Nothing to be done if the tool's spirit is dead. It's only that it cannot revive itself anymore. Ling Han rubbed a hand over the battle armor. As long as my martial intent is strong enough, I will still be able to activate this battle armor. Moreover, I heard that there is a thunder-aligned martial arts technique concealed within, though I don't know whether it's true or mere rumor. Let's see if I can activate it. The members of the Winter Moon sect could not accomplish this feat because even the strongest of the Winter Moon sect was only in the spiritual infant tier, whereas this battle armor was at least a level 9 spirit tool. But it was a different story for Ling Han. He possessed a sliver of divine sense of the heaven tier, plus he was currently in the Black Tower. He injected his origin power into the Thunder battle armor, but there was no reaction. Then he poured his divine sense into it, and still there was no reaction. This can't be right. Even his divine sense of the heaven tier was actually unable to stimulate the martial intent within? Or was he unable to stimulate it because it was too severely damaged? Then he could only use the power of the Black Tower. With a thought from Ling Han, the Black Tower immediately reacted. Wang, the battle armor began to light up. One metallic plate after another, those patterns lit up and transformed into a language that was completely illegible to Ling Han. He now understood slightly. This was not really letters, but a very high-level martial intent, and if one wanted to try to figure it out, he would possibly need a few hundred, a few thousand, or even more than 10,000 years to do so. It was the same for the indestructible Heaven Scroll. He stilled slightly, and with another thought, he saw a very small crystal suddenly float in midair. This was actually a space that the Thunder battle armor possessed on its own. It was revealed to him after he had activated it, and aside from this crystal, there was a small bottle. But who knew what it contained? This crystal. Memory crystal! Ling Han recognized what it was, and was extremely surprised. Once a memory crystal was activated, it could record everything that was happening around it, but it was only a one-time record. After that, the next time it was activated, one would be able to observe every single detail that happened every minute, every second, and from every angle, as if one was observing from the point of view of a god. This crystal was extremely valuable, and was ordinarily used to record when an ultimate elite was practicing his techniques, which would then be recorded by the crystal and passed on to later generations. Ling Han looked at it closely. There was a black line on the memory crystal, which meant that this crystal had been used once before. Otherwise, it would be completely clear and pure. He immediately injected his divine sense into it. Wang, he instantly appeared in an unfamiliar environment. In this environment, he did not have a physical body, but could move according to his will and appear anywhere he liked. However, this environment was only about a mile-sized circle, and there was a completely white space outside of this single mile. That was because that the memory crystal could only record events as they happened within this limited space. Ling Han's eyes swept over, and instantly looked shocked. A girl with long purple hair was currently speeding through the wilderness, bringing rapid change to the scene. Thus he confirmed that the memory crystal had to be on her, which was why she was the central part of this scene and could cause changes to the scene. And this girl was precisely Xue Xian, one of the 7 elites of the heaven tier from his last life. This had obviously happened after Ling Han had been obliterated by the Black Tower, because Xue Xian's ability was unfathomable. Not even Ling Han could fully figure out her true prowess, but the memory crystal was very vividly recording the fluctuations in her aura. Ling Han deduced that this aura was weaker than the Azure Demon Emperor's, and Xue Xian should have broken through to the shattering void tier. Indeed, after he died, there should have happened a revolutionary change to their environment, which allowed Sword Emperor and the others to charge all the way into the shattering void tier. Even that crazy disciple of his, Jiangyu Feng, managed to take this step, and they could have possibly shattered the void and entered into the realm of gods. However, there was an obvious anxiety in Xue Xian's expression, and from the look of her, she seemed like she was fleeing. One of the elites of the heaven tier from his last life, who had even broken through to shattering void tier, was actually fleeing? Why was she fleeing? And what enemy was she fleeing from? Chapter 357 Xue Xian. Chapter 357 Xue Xian. Sword Emperor? Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden? Setting Sun Saber Emperor? Ling Han watched on patiently. Currently, what Xue Xian was wearing was precisely the Thunder battle armor. Moreover, it was still a completely undamaged one, and there were flashes of white lightning flickering all over, making her seem as if she was a heroic war goddess. Ling Han discovered, much to his shock, that Xue Xian had extraordinarily long ears that were sticking up tall and proud like a rabbit's ears, whereas her eyes were exuding a white light, as if they were a pair of electric balls. Although he had not seen Xue Xian many times, he still remembered clearly that Xue Xian should not look too different from an ordinary human being, unlike now when her ears were sharp and long, and it seemed as if her eyes had electricity running through them. Strange, how was he so sure that this girl was Xue Xian with just one look? The first proof was her hair. Ling Han had only seen one person with purple-colored hair. The second one was her face. Even if her eyes were both shining like there was electricity in them, that face was still Xue Xian's. And the third was the thunder battle armor. It was her symbol. Ling Han had to admit, though this appearance was a little strange, it was also a different kind of beauty. At least, it was not something that Lu Yutong and Li Xichan could rival. "They're going to catch up," Xue Xian said suddenly. She was naturally not talking to Ling Han, but she activated the memory crystal and was currently in the process of recording. "I can sense their aura." Sure enough, 3 figures appeared in the distance, and they were extremely fast. They seemed to walk calmly step by step, but each step would cross a distance of 100 miles. As if they were able to shrink the distance into mere inches. Xue Xian was not slow, but the speed of these 3 people was faster, and in a short while, the distance between the 2 sides had shortened to half a mile. One of the 3 pursuers, a middleman, said, "Xue Xian, you are a genius of our race, so why do you want to commit treachery? What has the destruction of the human race have to do with you?" He had a head of white hair and his eyes were shining white, as if they were electric balls. The difference was that there was a purple vein on his forehead, which looked as if it was born from his anger, but also seemed to be formed naturally. It was not only him. The other 2 old men also had such veins, which were also on the forehead. The first words were enough to give Ling Han a shock: the destruction of the human race? If any other had said such vicious words, Ling Han would merely think it was nonsense or bragging. But these 3 old men, none of the 3 of them had an aura weaker than Xue Xian, and that was the aura of at least the Shattering Void Tier. 3 elites of the Shattering Void Tier combined forces. That was really enough firepower to eliminate every single living thing in this world. "I have lived here for more than 300 years, and have long become part of this world. How could I stand by and watch as you all do such an insane deed?" Xue Xian asked coldly, though she was still moving extremely fast. Obviously, her intentions were not to engage into a verbal battle, but deliberately using the memory crystal to create a record. "Han, you are one of our purple lightning race, and you will be for your whole life," the old man on the left side said, his face cold. "We can talk calmly. No matter what, Xue Xian is one of our race's outstanding geniuses in the lower realm. Even if she returned to our ancestral land, she would still be exceptional. Xue Xian, I know you are only momentarily confused. Why don't you quickly come to your senses?" the old man on the right side said with a gentle smile. They were just right. One played nice, while the other played mean. Lower realm? Ling Han's heart trembled. These 3 old men were not as simple as mere elites of the Shattering Void Tier, but could even possibly come from the realm of gods. That was extremely possible. The ability of these 3 were above even the Shattering Void Tier, gods. Xue Xian was in the Shattering Void Tier, but she did not have a purple vein on her forehead. Perhaps that was a symbol that only a god would possess. Aside from that, their auras were stronger than Xue Xian's and they were much faster. All these factors added together made Ling Han come up with the deduction that these 3 were gods. However, it seemed that gods didn't seem as strong as he had imagined. Putting aside the Azura Demon Emperor who had been split into 9 parts and suppressed for millennia, these 3 old men should be in their best condition, yet why had they still been unable to subdue Xue Xian after such a long time? "You do not have to waste your breath. As long as I, Xue Xian, am alive, I will definitely stop you," Xue Xian said firmly. "Then don't blame me for being merciless." The eyes of the old man standing in the center grew fierce, and his right hand grabbed at empty air. With a Z, a white electrical spear actually formed. Patterns lit up along its body, and it exuded a terrifying aura. Even though Ling Han was a mere observer, he felt as if he was experiencing the real thing. If he was really physically there, merely this aura would be enough to kill him even if he was still the heaven-tier elite he had been in his last life. In front of real power, he was still too weak. With a wave of the hand of the old man, this electric spear shot towards Xue Xian. With a soft exclamation, a circle of electrical light appeared around Xue Xian, which flung out her slender body. She had not only increased her speed, but also changed her course. Just when Ling Han thought that she would be able to dodge this attack, he saw that electric spear also change direction and continued to fly towards Xue Xian's star. When he looked at Xue Xian, however, that burst of speed was definitely an excessive move for her. It made her face extremely pale, and there also appeared a sliver of blood at the corner of her mouth. It was definitely impossible for her to make that move again. The electric spear chased up to her, and she could only turn around to parry it, putting on a scene of flashing lightning bolts. Z could be heard continuously, and martial intent transformed into multiple electric seals. Ling Han had broken out into cold sweat merely just from watching. This was enough to kill him over 100 times in his last life. The lightning spear reached its target, yet was blocked by a curtain of thunder. However, with such a pause, those 3 old men managed to come closer, and the 4 of them were suddenly embroiled in a fierce battle. These 3 old men were indeed stronger, and it was as if they had an endless pool of power. Yet they gave Ling Han the feeling that they seemed to be deliberately exercising restraint, and had not used all their battle prowess. As a result, even with the 3 of them combining forces, they were still unable to capture Xue Xian. This despicable power of regulation, it had suppressed our abilities. The 3 old men seemed to be a bit displeased, and could not help but begin to complain. Suppression from the power of regulation? Multiple thoughts streaked rapidly through Ling Han's mind. With the level that he had reached in his last life, he was qualified enough to come into contact with some hidden secrets, especially when he had visited various ancient historical sites and obtained a large amount of information nearing the end of his last life. There were some previous deductions by his predecessors. They had only been deductions, but combined with this scene that Ling Han was witnessing, Ling Han could definitely confirm with a nod that those deductions were true. It was rumored that the realm of gods had its laws, whereas the mortal realm also had its own rules, and neither was to interfere with the other. Why was a shattering void tier elite able to shatter the empty void and step into the realm of gods? It was not because a shattering void tier elite was so strong that they could shatter the world, but because the power of the shattering void tier had exceeded the limits the mortal realm could sustain, and thus would be rejected by the mortal realm, entering the realm of gods where limits were broader. In the realm of gods, the world was sturdier and could withstand the strain of the level of gods. In other words, it was a relatively easy process to traverse from the mortal realm to the realm of gods because the mortal realm would actively reject one's existence, which was equivalent to helping the process. The prerequisite was that your ability had to reach the shattering void tier, and it was that instant when there was a high chance that you would be able to break through and become a god. However, it was difficult to traverse from the realm of gods and enter the mortal realm. Firstly, it was because the realm of gods was extremely sturdy and solid, so it would be very difficult to shatter the empty void. Secondly, the mortal realm naturally rejected those at the level of gods, and it was of course difficult to sail against the current. Furthermore, even when one had arrived in the mortal realm, a god probably couldn't use the power on the level of gods. Instead, they would have to suppress their battle prowess. Otherwise, they would definitely be rejected by the mortal realm, and directly forced back to the realm of gods. Ling Han immediately had a deduction. These 3 old men were indeed gods, but their powers had been suppressed. As a result, even though their power obviously exceeded Xue Xian, it had still led to the scene unfolding in front of him now. Chapter 358 Everything was a lie. Chapter 358 Everything was a lie. Xue Xian was currently engaged in a fierce battle with the three old men. Ling Han was extremely shocked. Xue Xian really deserved the name of a peerless genius. Though she was one person against three, she actually had the upper hand. This would really make one grab their head and exclaim in utter shock. Someone in the Shattering Void tier was actually capable of having the upper hand in a clash against three gods? But that was indeed the reality. Who asked this to be the mortal world, which would suppress the cultivation of gods? And if they were battling on the same level, the ability of a peerless genius to battle one stronger than herself could be displayed to the fullest. However, gods were still gods after all. Even if their abilities were suppressed, they still had a bottomless pool of power at their fingertips. As long as they could drag out the battle long enough, then Xue Xian would definitely be exhausted, and thus captured. And the three old men did indeed do so. They merely continued to force Xue Xian to endlessly expend her energy, either too fast nor too slow. Xue Xian shouted repeatedly, and scoffed. The thunder battle armor on her body released a white light that transformed into multiple dragons made of thunder that pounced and attacked towards those three old men. This was obviously a powerful move, and instantly made those three old men flustered. They only managed to destroy these thunder dragons after much effort. Xue Xian took advantage of the opening and escaped the battle, though they caught up to her soon after and another fierce battle ensued. Ling Han gritted his teeth. So it appeared that the thunder battle armor was actually a level 10 spirit tool. If not, how could it possibly become a threat to three gods? Their battle prowess had indeed been suppressed, but that was still battle prowess on the level of the Shattering Void tier. Against an opponent of the Heaven tier, they'd be able to kill him with a few blows. All those years ago, Xue Xian could only be ranked 4th among the 7 of them in the Heaven tier. Had she done that deliberately to conceal her skill, or did Sword Emperor and the others also possess a 10th tier spirit tool that could dominate her thunder battle armor? Ling Han sighed. At that time, he had his whole focus on alchemy, and did not consider their ranking in terms of martial arts seriously at all. He had only thought that as long as he could break through to the Shattering Void tier, he'd be able to push open the doors to the realm of gods and simultaneously suppress Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, that bandit. He had no idea that there was such a huge gulf between himself and the rest of them. Now, he was very clear that he possessed battle prowess of over a dozen battle stars, and the installation of power from the Black Tower could raise his battle prowess to the next tier, and that kind of battle prowess was practically enough to defy logic. As a result, he did not have any such trump card of martial arts in his last life, but was still able to rank as the 7th strongest in the world and stand equal to Sword Emperor and the others. Now that he thought about it, he felt himself flush. Fuck, a real man doesn't boast about his past achievements. If I ever see Sword Emperor and the others again, I will definitely thrash them until their backsides burst. Who asked me to spend all my energy on alchemy in my last life? In terms of achievements in alchemy, even Sword Emperor, Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, and now Lan too have to obediently address me as Grand Master and beg me to concoct alchemical pills for them. Ling Han praised himself internally, then continued to watch the scene. In truth, though the battle was fierce, it was only repeating endlessly by now. Xue Xian could always turn the tables around in a dangerous situation by using the thunder battle armor and force the three old men into a flustered chaos. She would then take advantage of the opening created and charge out of their siege, which made Ling Han feel a bit bored. However, the events recorded in the memory crystal could only be broadcast according to the order in which they had happened, and there was no way to fast forward, pause, slow forward, or rewind. Thus, Ling Han could only watch quietly. Yet, after quite a long time fighting, not only Ling Han was bored of watching the same scene repetitively, those three old men also appeared to have had enough. With the thunder battle armor to protect her, if we continue to battle this way, we will not be able to subdue her, the old man on the left side said. Indeed. The old man on the right side agreed with a nod. The old man in the center thought for a moment, then said, Then I shall use a sliver of divine power and destroy this thunder battle armor. Then the regulations of this realm would immediately react and expel you, or even wound you severely. The old man on the left side said, frowning. We can no longer take that into account. If we allow her to expose the secret and the people of this realm were able to prepare themselves, it may ruin the plans that the clan has worked on for 10,000 years. Furthermore, if the reason for the failure lies on our side, those other parties will definitely create trouble for us. The old man in the center said. Fine then, you must be careful. The old man on the left side nodded. It's all right. I will control my power, and use only enough to pierce through the thunder battle armor, so the backlash that I will experience from the power of regulation would not be too severe. The old man in the center wore a cold expression. A white electric light floated out of his white eyes, and all of a sudden, his aura spiked up madly. It was only that one instant, and his power had completely surpassed the shattering void tier. God tier. This was the power of gods. Ling Han sensed for the strength of this power, and in comparison, his power as one of the heaven tier in his last life was like a drop of water set against the great sea, not qualified to be compared against such power at all. Additionally, this kind of power had already far surpassed the Jura demon emperor he had faced previously. The other two old men simultaneously shot away, as if they would be implicated as well if they had stayed at their original positions. They had reacted correctly. A crack in the empty space appeared behind that old man without any prior signs, and immediately transformed into something like a gigantic mouth. It opened and closed abruptly, swallowing that old man into unknown depths. Was that the expulsion from the power of the realm? It directly sent the old man out of this world. Ling Han was delighted. The old man had yet to deliver his attack before being expelled by the power of the realm, so now that Xue Xian had one powerful opponent less that she had to worry about, she should definitely have a chance at winning. Yet he had barely finished this thought when he saw that the very instant before that crack closed up, a white lightning spear was rapidly shot out of it. This was different from the previous attacks. This lightning spear was at least 100 times stronger than before, and what was more terrifying was that there were patterns weaving around on this lightning spear, and the might exuding from it was enough to make even one at the shattering void tier shiver in fear. This was the most terrifying attack of a god. It was not power, but rather martial intent, a martial intent that would completely crush its opponent. Ling Han's expression took a swift turn. That old man had still managed to deliver his attack at the last instant right before he had been expelled by the power of the realm. That was too terrifying. Pooh! Xue Xian was not given any opportunity to avoid nor parry. This spear directly pierced through her delicate body. So what if it was the thunder battle armor she was wearing? A hole was still directly pierced through it. Ling Han finally understood. So that was how the hole on the thunder battle armor was created. Ah! Xue Xian screamed. She had received this blow right on her heart, and this spear directly pierced through her chest, so her heart must have exploded. Even if she was in the shattering void tier, she probably wouldn't live for much longer. Ling Han could not help but tense. Could it be that Xue Xian would fall here? Yet Xue Xian, on the other hand, ran like crazy, and as she removed the thunder battle armor, she said, Boundless Mountain, Clear Harmony Palace Hall has the answer to all. Person of the future, everything that you've been told about in the past were lies. The real answer lies there, and you must obtain it. Otherwise, the calamity will be repeated. With a toss, the thunder battle armor flew out through the sky, and her figure became smaller and smaller below, and soon disappeared without a trace. Obviously, the memory crystal was on the thunder battle armor. The thunder battle armor traversed over an immeasurable distance, and finally fell down upon the ground. Every pattern had lost its brilliance, and it was as if it had become a most ordinary battle armor. This condition of stillness persisted for about a few days. Then, the scene suddenly stopped, which was probably because there was a limit to the information that the memory crystal could record. It was full. Ling Han's divine sense automatically left the memory crystal and appeared back in the Black Tower. As the master of all in this place, he could very clearly judge that less than the time it takes to take a breath had passed. Anything that happened in one's divine sense had no effect on real time. It was as if it was a dream. One might have dreamt of living a whole lifetime, but when one awoke, only a few hours had passed. Uncountable guesses appeared in Ling Han's mind. He was also feeling a coldness that came from his very heart. Chapter 359 Unsealing the Battle Armor. Chapter 359 Unsealing the Battle Armor. According to historical records, more than 9,000 years ago, a massive chaos occurred, a tremendous calamity in which uncountable people died. As a result, a lapse appeared in the fields of martial arts and alchemy. Afterwards, the Heaven Sword sect, the Absolute Saber sect, and various other sects stepped out and joined forces to pacify the utter chaos, which was what led to the peace that the future generations had enjoyed for the subsequent 8,000 and more years. Compared with the absolute disaster at that time, the current fighting and killing were only a small matter. Ling Han had a guess. The huge chaos at that time had been incited by the party that those three old men represented. Xue Xian and they were members of the same race. They had wanted to bring her back to the realm of gods but were met with refusal, as she wanted to live or die with this world. Ling Han had personally witnessed her ultimate end. Though he had not seen the final scene in which she died in battle, without the thunder battle armor, with her heart pierced, and two god-level pursuers behind her, how could she have managed to escape alive? Xue Xian was a disciple of the Blue Thunder sect, and in this current era, the Blue Thunder sect was still standing firm and strong in the Middle State. It was said that they were one of the major parties that stood against the chaos all those years ago. In that case, Xue Xian's race probably didn't have anything to do with the Blue Thunder sect. They had only discovered that there was a member of their race in the Blue Thunder sect, and thus had the intention of bringing her back to the realm of gods. Jian Yu Feng and the others, several hundred elites of the Heaven tier combined together, battled an ultimate elite of the Shattering Void tier. According to the time, that person could very possibly be an invader from the realm of gods, or even a god himself. However, because he was suppressed by the power of the realm, he could only possess the battle prowess on the level of the Shattering Void tier. So ultimately, he was dragged into a battle of resilience by so many elites of the Heaven tier, then killed through their combined forces? Theoretically, that was probable. But the problem here was, why did the realm of gods want to invade this world? It was public opinion that the realm of gods should be rich in resources, and divine herbs would be growing everywhere there. Simply picking any one of them and swallowing it would allow a normal person to immediately become a god. Even if he was not able to become a god, then he should still at least shoot up to the Heaven tier, or the Shattering Void tier. What feature of this world would then attract the covetous eyes of such a rich place? It was just like how the various parties of the North region were disdainful of the desolate North because even if they conquered the latter, what was the point? Only those minor, insignificant parties would think of striving for a niche in the desolate North. Could it be that the realm of gods had such parties as well? They could no longer survive in the realm of gods, and so decided to travel to this world? No, that was not right. Those three old men said that they wanted to bring Xue Xian back, which meant that they had no plans to stay here for a long time. Additionally, Xue Xian mentioned that they wanted to destroy the whole human race. That was not something a conqueror would do. Without subjects, was a ruler still a ruler? Most important were Xue Xian's last words. She said that everything the future generation heard were lies. What could that mean? In terms of her era, she must have been talking about that huge calamity that had happened about 10,000 years ago. It was not true. It was only a lie. Ling Han could not help but feel a headache coming on. What should have been a very logical story seemed to have been completely turned upside down with a few words from Xue Xian. But Xue Xian was so determined to send out these words even if it meant that she would die in battle, so how could she possibly be joking around? That was definitely impossible. It appeared that he definitely had to make a trip to the Clear Harmony Palace Hall at the Boundless Mountain and find the answers Xue Xian had buried there. He knew where the Boundless Mountain was the Middle State. Of course, it might no longer be called the Boundless Mountain by now. Furthermore, after 10,000 years, was the Clear Harmony Palace Hall still standing? He'd think about it in future. Ling Han sighed. You obviously had the memory crystal on you, so why hadn't you simply recorded all the answers inside instead of forcing him to have to make a side trip to the Boundless Mountain? Small Tower, can you repair this battle armor? He asked. No. Small Tower moved left and right. This was a gesture it made when it was shaking its head. If it was nodding, it would move forwards and backwards. Ling Han was already familiar with its gestures. It paused, then continued. However, I can disperse the various energies within so that this battle armor could still be used for a while. Ling Han was delighted, then said, Then, come over quickly. Small Tower trembled slightly, and a powerful might gushed forth. The thunder battle armor instantly floated midair and began to shake. Zzz. Multiple patterns on it lit up, and then extinguished. However, it was only a short while before this battle armor fell back down onto the ground with a smack. It's done, Small Tower said expressionlessly. Ling Han was not that surprised anymore. It had also erased the tool spirit in the demon birth sword as easily and as quickly like it had done now. Moreover, this was only a level 10 spirit tool that was severely damaged. He put on the thunder battle armor and tried to activate it. Zzz. Multiple patterns lit up, and abruptly, there were uncountable lightning bolts jumping all over his body. It was not just his torso, but his whole body, and they formed a barrier of lightning. Ling Han gave a wave of his hand, and Xiu, a blazing white electric light shot out into the distance, and transformed into a sharp blade. He delivered a punch, and the electric light transformed into a blazing white fist that possessed formidable force behind it. With a sharp whistle, he attacked repeatedly with both hands. Xiu, Xiu, Xiu. Fist chi and sword chi were shot out simultaneously, and, compounded by the thunder battle armor, transformed into blazing white swords of lightning and fists of thunder. Ling Han could not help but laugh uncontrollably. This thunder battle armor had at least given him a power upgrade of 5 battle stars. Furthermore, this was only in terms of attack. He had yet to try out its defense, but he believed that this barrier of thunder would definitely not be weak. He was only capable of activating a portion of the patterns on the thunder battle armor now. In other words, with the advancement of his cultivation level, the might of the thunder battle armor would also advance accordingly. However, it could not possibly reach the level of the shattering void tier anymore, because the 2 holes in its front and back were still there. That meant there was a portion of patterns missing, and no matter what, it could not possibly display its strongest abilities anymore. Xue Xian, we have not had many relations in the past, but the choice you've made has impressed me very much. Don't worry, I will definitely find the answer that you have left behind, and not allow the calamity to happen again, Ling Han said somberly. After making this oath, he shrugged on his outer garments. The thunder battle armor was a high-level spirit tool and could actually adapt accordingly to the different physique of its wearer. Thus, while he was obviously taller and broader than Xue Xian, he did not feel it was in any way tight when wearing this battle armor. There was still that bottle. Ling Han opened it and looked inside. There was only a drop of purple-colored blood inside, and it was exuding a very powerful aura, instantly making him feel as if his skin was being pared by knives, like his skin was going to crack. Was this Xue Xian's blood? Ling Han replaced the lid on the bottle. This might be the key to opening the place in the clear Harmony Palace Hall where Xue Xian had buried her answer, so he could not use it now. He exited the Black Tower. There was still some time left until dinner. Furthermore, if they wanted to go to the Duan residence, they would have to go in the middle of the night, and it was still a little too early now. He had free time anyways, so he called Liu Tong and the others over and began to teach them martial arts. First was an inquirer session. He asked them to inform him of the difficulties they had encountered during cultivation, which he would clarify and answer. After that, he taught them different cultivation and martial arts techniques based on their different abilities. He did not need to teach Liu Tong, however. Chu Wujiu was a swordsman as well, so Ling Han taught him the 4-seasoned sword technique. Can you wield a saber? Unfortunately, Ling Han had not managed to get any supreme saber technique from the Setting Sun's Saber Emperor. However, there was no shortage of saber techniques in his head, so he found a black demon saber technique which he had Can learn. This was a black grade high-level martial arts technique, and it was an excellent choice for his current level. It could nearly be considered earth grade. At the moment, Lu Yutong was at the 8th layer of the Gushing Spring tier, whereas Zhu Wujiu was at the 5th. They had improved very rapidly. This was naturally due to the alchemical pills they had taken. Ling Han warned them repeatedly that they must not be in a rush to break through when they reached the 9th layer of the Gushing Spring tier, but should rather strengthen their foundations firmly before taking the final step of breaking through. Otherwise, the cultivation that had been accumulated with the use of alchemical pills would be too weak, and it would be impossible for them to climb to the highest level of their cultivation. At night, Guan Yuan finally came downstairs and joined them for dinner. Then, they quietly waited for midnight to arrive. Chapter 360 A Ghostly Manor? Chapter 360 A Ghostly Manor? Only Guan Yuan and Ling Han were to participate in the movement this time round. They were only going to take a look at things, and not going there looking for a fight. Thus, they did not need too many people with them. Furthermore, only Qin Yi could be considered as an acceptable fighter amongst their group. The others were still too inexperienced. As for Yu Kai-yu, he was still snoring loudly away. After drinking so much, he would definitely not be waking up before tomorrow. Ling Han and Guan Yuan made use of the darkness of the night to move, and wove through all the main streets and small alleys of the Sea Breeze City. Soon, a massive manor appeared in front of their eyes. Multiple lanterns were hung all around the manor, hinting at the tremendous wealth the manor's owner possessed. Ling Han leaped up onto the roof, and as he swept his eyes over, surprise filled his expression. Although it was completely bright all around the manor, inside the manor itself, there was only darkness as not one room was lit. Even if it could be explained by saying that it was already midnight, and thus most people would have slept by now, it was still strange for such a huge manor to be completely as dark as ink like this. Guan Yuan instantly wanted to climb over the walls and enter, yet was restrained by Ling Han. "There's an alarm array in place," Ling Han said. Even without making use of the Eye of Truth, he could still sense it with his divine sense of the heaven tier. Guan Yuan immediately stopped. He naturally did not have the slightest bit of doubt about Ling Han's words. This young man was too terrifying. He was only 17 years old, and not only was he already an Earth-grade alchemist, Ling Han was also his equal in martial arts. "Can you dismantle it?" he asked quietly. Ling Han smiled faintly and answered, "It's not too difficult." This was only an alarm array, and not a massive array like the Mountain Protection Great Array. Furthermore, because Ling Han had entered so many ancient historical sites in the past, this was the type of array that he was most familiar with. The Black Tower was getting more and more abundant in materials, and only a thought from Ling Han was needed to withdraw them one after another. Soon enough, he had torn a hole into the alarm array and stepped into the manor with Guan Yuan at his side. "How eerie!" Guan Yuan could not help but fold his arms. Ling Han nodded. From the outside, he had already sensed that there was something off with how dark the manor was. Now that he had stepped into the manor, there was an additional feeling of eeriness and terror. The two of them passed through the garden and entered a courtyard on tiptoes. They observed silently from the corner. In an uncertain situation, it was naturally best to be extremely careful and cautious. However, after only a short while, the both of them looked surprised, and exchanged a look. Such a massive manor was actually as silent as a grave, and there was not the slightest bit of sound to be heard. Even if it was the middle of the night and the residents were all asleep, there should still be the sound of breathing, right? However, this place was so quiet that there wasn't even the sound of people breathing. It was as if all the residents of this manor had been massacred and no one was left alive. They entered the courtyard and began their search. However, as they searched one room after another, their expressions became increasingly dark. There was no one in any of the rooms. There was neither any living person nor any corpse. What was going on here? "Let's go take a look over there." Ling Han pointed at another courtyard. Guan Yuan nodded, and the two of them went to search the other courtyard. However, the results were the same. There was no one, alive nor dead. Let's separate and search. After 1 hour, we will meet back at the place we came in, Ling Han said. This manor was very large, and for courtyards alone, there were close to 20 of them here. All right. After an hour, the two of them appeared back at the point of their entry. They shook their heads respectively. Neither of them had found anything. There was not a single person in this whole manor. How could this be? Let's go out first and examine it from the outside, Ling Han said. The two of them exited the Duan residence and waited for daybreak. When the cockerel crowed, they saw the manor suddenly come alive. One after another, people came out of their rooms, and life came back to the manor instantly. Ling Han and Guan Yuan exchanged a look, yet a cold feeling rose up from their very hearts. This was too abnormal. If you look closely, the crowd seemed to have all come from that room, Ling Han said. Currently, he and Guan Yuan were seated on the top of a loft. Thanks to their high position, they could see very clearly. Guan Yuan nodded. And I've seen that room before. It should be a very ordinary hall. But it definitely can't contain so many people. Moreover, I've checked it before. At that time, there was definitely no one inside. Not even a damn shadow of a person. Ling Han looked curious at this and said, Then there must be a secret passage inside. At night they would enter through this secret passage, and then come out at dawn. No wonder we didn't find anyone yesterday. They should have hidden themselves in an underground secret chamber. But what makes me curious is, why would they have to do that? This was the Duan residence, their own territory. What was the reason for them to leave their comfortable rooms and hide underground instead? We'll go back first, then come back tonight for another probe, Ling Han said. This time, even he was starting to feel very curious. When the two of them returned to the inn, Yu Kai-yun had finally woken up, but he still had a hangover and was currently gripping onto his head. Any slightly loud sound was enough to make him bare his teeth in pain. Ha, let's see if you dare to get yourself drunk again. Ling Han laughed deliberately loudly. Yu Kai-yu hurriedly covered his ears and asked, I seem to remember you were the one who had purposely encouraged me to drink? Ling Han laughed and said, Go and drink some ginger soup. I'll bring you to a nice place tonight. Yu Kai-yu instantly looked at Ling Han strangely and said, I say, you already have 2 beautiful girls, and you still want to go to indulge in sensual pleasures? It'd be fine for me alone to go to that kind of place. Ling Han was at a loss at first before he finally realized what he was talking about. He couldn't help but shake his head, then said, What filthy thoughts! Pay. I'm not as filthy as you. You already have 2 beautiful girls, and you're still interested in those women outside. Yu Kai-yu expressed his disdain. After Yu Kai-yu meditated for a while and completely recovered from his hangover, Ling Han introduced Zhu Wujio, King Yi and Guan Yuan to him. Haha, since you all are Junior Brother Han's friends, then you all will be my friends from now on as well, he said very boldly. This was to give face to Ling Han. If it was anyone else, the young master of the Yu clan would not be in such a good temper. He was at first planning to urge Ling Han to set out, yet Ling Han said he wanted to buy some items at the Sea Breeze City and prepare a bit. Additionally, he also wanted to bring Yu Kai-yu to a nice place tonight. As a result, he could only suppress this urge and went to buy some rations as well. It would at least take them half a year after they had entered the Dark Devil Forest, so he had to ensure that they were sufficiently prepared. As the only grandson of the Yu clan, he naturally had a spatial ring of his own. He was initially a bit proud, but when he saw that even Hun-yo had one when she took out some dried meat to chew on, he was instantly struck with a blow. Furthermore, when he smelt the delicious aroma of the meat, he could feel his mouth begin to water. This guy had really thick skin. He actually went to beg for some meat from Hun-yo. And Hun-yo, who usually thought of food as if it was her very life, very generously gave him a piece, which made Yu Kai-yu scarf it down with his eyebrows twitching. Gods, how could there be something so delicious in this world? Within a few moments, Yu Kai-yu was completely bought over by Hun-yo. At night, when Ling Han called over Guan Yuan and Yu Kai-yu and the group set out towards the Duan residence, he heard Yu Kai-yu deadpan. Junior Brother Han, So who Neo is your cup of tea? TSK, TSK, TSK. You really have a unique taste, to like this kind of young sprout. Chapter 361 Going Underground. Chapter 361 Going Underground. Ling Han almost stumbled. What did this guy see that caused him to arrive at that conclusion? When did you become blind? He asked in annoyance. Yu Kaiyu laughed lightly and said, If you hadn't calmed the little girl, why would Hu Neo keep chattering to me and say that you are Neo's? Ling Han was dumbstruck. Hu Neo was a really mischievous child, plus she was clever. She knew that Yu Kaiyu was his cousin, so she switched her strategy to getting on good terms with his family. If they managed to find his mother, then with this little girl's skill, wouldn't she be perfectly capable of charming Yu Hongchang so much that she would recognize her as her little daughter-in-law? And after another 10 or so years, this little girl would have grown up to become a young girl, and for a genius like Ling Han, it was practically a definite fact that he would break through to the flower blossom tier. Then, compared to a lifespan of at least a few hundred years, wouldn't 10 years pass in what might seem to be the blink of an eye? Ling Han could not help but shake his head as he wondered what thoughts were flying around in Hu Neo's little head. Since you like the little girl, then just yield the other 2 beautiful girls to me, Yu Kaiyu said, slinging an arm around Ling Han's shoulder. Ha ha! Ling Han laughed dryly and said, One of them is my little female attendant, and the other is my alchemist apprentice. Just think, if you marry either one of them, what are you going to address me as? Pei, you are really too devious, just holding on to them and not doing anything but not letting anyone take over either. I look down on you! Yu Kaiyu exclaimed, filled with righteous indignation. Speak less nonsense. We've arrived at the Duan residence. Ling Han lowered his hand. They had arrived in front of the Duan residence. Isn't this Duan Jingji's house? Yu Kaiyu looked confused. You know him? Ling Han asked. Kind of. He came to pay a visit to the sect before. After all, he is in the spiritual pedestal tier, and is quite a strong martial artist. Furthermore, the Sea Breeze City is located right below the sect, so we are very closely linked together. Now that an elite of this level has appeared, he would naturally have to report to the sect and make his stand clear so that we can ensure that he would not break the rules of the sect. Yu Kaiyu pointed out. He paused, then continued, What are we doing here? You couldn't have possibly fallen for his daughter who's just a few years old, right? Fuck you! Ling Han rolled his eyes. As he dismantled the alarm array, he said, You'll see later, but I hope you won't yell crazily with your big mouth. Who do you think I am? You think that I don't even have that little bit of self-control? Yu Kaiyu humphed. 10 minutes later. Ghost! Ghost! Yu Kaiyu looked a little pale. Is this fuck asterisk place really the home of living people? Why isn't there any single living person inside? Ling Han and Guan Yuan exchanged a grin. They had deliberately brought Yu Kaiyu around the manor on a tour, resulting in this empty manor and eerie surroundings causing Yu Kaiyu to feel his hair stand on end. Come on! As they advanced, Ling Han explained the disputes between Guan Yuan and Duan Jingji for Yu Kaiyu's benefit. It was only now that Yu Kaiyu understood why they had come here. However, he was curious himself by now. What was going on with this Duan residence? Why had everyone disappeared in the middle of the night? They arrived at the hall that they had seen at daytime and began to search carefully throughout it. However, this secret passage seemed to be extraordinarily well hidden. They had searched for about an hour, but still had not managed to find it. Ling Han stopped and activated the Eye of Truth. Ow 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 ow. Previously, when he had battled the 7 sons of Ao family successively, he had overused the Eye of Truth. Even now, it had not fully recovered. Thus, the moment he activated the Eye of Truth, bloody tears streamed out of his right eye. The sight was very chilling. He quickly withdrew the mystical power. The sweeping glance just now was enough for him to discover the location of the secret passage. It was really easy. However, the secret passage was easy to find, but it might not be that way to find the mechanism to reveal it. Because they still did not want to alert anyone, they naturally could not cause too much damage, and used the most direct and violent method to directly crash in. Thankfully, the three of them were all in the spiritual ocean tier, and had a very sensitive divine sense. After confirming the location of the secret passage, it would be much easier to look for the mechanism to open it. After over another 10 minutes, they found the secret on one of the walls. They moved a painting slightly, and a dark, cold cave opening had appeared on the floor tiles. "Are we really going in?" Yu asked with a bit of hesitation. He was not the slightest bit foolish. There were so many places inside the Duan residence, yet it appeared to be like a ghostly manor. Furthermore, there was a secret passage here, and it was possible that everyone had hidden within. Choosing to stay underground when they had perfectly comfortable rooms to sleep in, there was definitely something strange going on. Moreover, Duan Jingji was in the spiritual pedestal tier, and if he discovered them, would they be killed to ensure that the secret was not leaked out? Of course. Ling Han nodded. His curiosity was completely ignited. "Aren't you scared that we won't be able to come back out?" Yu asked sullenly, feeling like he really had boarded a ship of thieves. "It's fine. I'm here," Ling Han said with full confidence. This was not an exaggeration on his part. With the Black Tower for them to hide themselves in, they need not worry about anything that will threaten their lives, at least in a small place like this world. How would Yu know what Ling Han was thinking? However, he was also certain he could not convince Ling Han otherwise, what more when he himself was curious as well as slightly alert under the eyes of the Winter Moon sect. What was Duan Jingji planning to do? They entered the secret passage and went downwards all the way. It was very dark, and after they had walked for about 100 meters, the stairs stopped. Instead, a long corridor had appeared in front of them. There were doors on both sides of the corridor, which likely meant that there were many rooms behind these doors. Ling Han stuck close to one of the doors and listened for a while. He made a gesture of pushing the door open, and Guan Yuan and Yu nodded, signaling that they were prepared. If there was anyone inside, they would swiftly subdue him. Ling Han pressed his hands against the doors, used a bit of force, and the doors were opened. The doors were not locked. Woo! The three of them immediately covered their noses. There was a powerful stench wafting out from inside the room. Shio. However, they still instantly leaped in. When their eyes swept over the inside of the room, shock filled their expressions. This room was very small, so small that it could only contain a large bed. What was shocking was the fact that it was not a bed that was set inside, but rather a coffin. Unlucky! Unlucky! Yu hurriedly retreated. No wonder there was a powerful stench. This was a tomb and the corpse had all rotted, so of course there would be a strong stench coming from inside. Guan Yuan was right behind him, whereas Ling Han was the last. "We don't have to look anymore, right? This should be an underground tomb," Yu said. Ling Han shook his head and said, "If this is an underground tomb, then where have all the living people gone to?" This was indeed something they could not figure out. "Let's go and take another look." The three of them continued to advance, and a crossroads appeared in front of them, where even more doors could be seen ahead. "Let's continue on." Ling Han was determined to get to the bottom of this matter. They continued to advance, and suddenly, they could smell an overwhelming stench, as if there was a mountain of corpses ahead of them. The smell was strong enough to cause someone to pass out from suffocation. The three of them wore very ugly expression, and disgust had turned their faces pale. They held their breaths. With the ability of the spiritual ocean tier, it was definitely not a problem for them to hold their breaths for about an hour. An underground river appeared in front of them, and there were multiple corpses floating in it. Chapter 362 Secret of the Duan Clan. Chapter 362 Secret of the Duan Clan. In one of the large manors in the city, all the residents were living underground in the middle of the night. Furthermore, this place had a horrendous stench to it, and there was even a river that was filled with floating corpses. No matter how they looked at it, there was something very strange going on here. Where had these corpses come from? Understanding flashed suddenly through Ling Han's head, and he exclaimed, "Let's go back!" He instantly made a move, When he reached a door, he pushed it open and there was yet another coffin inside. Yu Kaiyu and Guan Yuan came over as well. One of them asked. What have you found out? This morning, we obviously saw many people come out of the room above us, which means that they were all here. But we can't find even one single person now, so why do you think this is the case? Ling Han countered with a question. Guan Yuan's expression instantly changed drastically, and he exclaimed, It can't be that you suspect that these people have hidden themselves in those coffins? How could that be? With such a horrible stench here, the mere smell would be enough to suffocate anyone to death. For us, this is a terrible stench, but for some, this is a wonderful place for cultivation, Ling Han said calmly. How could that be? Yu Kaiyu exclaimed in shock. Ling Han did not answer. He simply gripped the lid of the coffin and gave it a firm push. Gee! The coffin opened, and a man was revealed within. He was wearing brightly colored clothing, with a lifelike expression on his face. He did not look like a corpse at all. This is someone of the Duan residence. I saw him at daytime, Guan Yuan said, his voice trembling slightly. He was in the spiritual ocean tier, so he would not easily forget anyone he had seen before, what more when it was something so fresh. He had just seen him this morning. But he was still alive at day, yet lay in a coffin at night, and a horrible stench was emanating from all over his body. How could he accept this reality? How could this be possible? Yu Kaiyu whispered. But the person in the coffin seemed to have really become a corpse, and there was absolutely no signs of him waking up at all. Ling Han shook his head and said, As long as it's related to a particular sect, then it would be possible. What sect? Yu Kaiyu asked in shock. The Thousand Corpse sect, Ling Han answered solemnly. Yu Kaiyu's expression changed again. He wanted to refute, but did not have the strength to. Previously, rumors had indeed spread out from the Falling Moon Gorge saying that the Thousand Corpse sect had been revived. However, the benevolent see benevolence, and the wise do not believe in rumors. The Winter Moon sect did not believe one bit that the Thousand Corpse sect that had disappeared for millennia would once again see the light of day. But seeing this scene in front of his eyes, Yu Kaiyu had no option but to believe in those rumors. Aside from the Thousand Corpse sect, what other party would be accompanied by corpses? How could any normal person bear to live in such surroundings? Has this sect really been revived? He asked, his face pale. There have been uncountable sects that have perished throughout history, but none of them were as notorious as the Thousand Corpse sect. Furthermore, its notoriety had lasted for millennia. Anyone who still remembered it would recall it with gritted teeth. That showed how despicable and hated the things that the Thousand Corpse sect had done all those years ago were. True, everyone would die. But to be dug out after their death and manipulated by another, forced to become a corpse soldier under their control, who could tolerate that? What do you think? Ling Han gazed at the man lying within the coffin. He had only briefly looked over the coffin just now, but now, upon closer examination, he could detect that there was corpse chi encircling the person lying in the coffin. In the beginning, how could he have imagined that this would be a branch of the Thousand Corpse sect? We must immediately return and bring this news back to the sect, Yu Kaiyu said hurriedly. If the Thousand Corpse sect really had made a comeback, then not only did they need to inform their sect, they would even have to announce it to the whole world, and mobilize the whole world to stand against this party. Otherwise, if the Thousand Corpse sect was given time to solidify their base, then most probably, about all the graves of the entire world would have been dug out. Ling Han looked like he was listening closely to something. Then he shook his head and said, I'm afraid we won't be able to leave. That is indeed correct. A voice suddenly rose up from behind them. Yu Kaiyu and Guan Yuan turned around at the same time, and saw that there was a man who looked to be in his 40s standing in the doorway. He was of medium build and had a handsome face. Though he did not look young anymore, he would still be capable of charming the hearts of a large number of aunties. Duan Jingji! Guan Yuan's eyes widened. Duan Jingji smiled faintly, rubbed his chin, and said, Guan Yuan, I was just wondering when I should call you over and refine you into my corpse soldier. But I never thought that you would actually deliver yourself to my doorstep. Guan Yuan's cultivation level was too low, so he did not have much knowledge about the Thousand Corpse sect. But merely hearing the phrase corpse soldier was enough to make one's heart shudder, so he knew that it could not be anything good. His heart trembled in his chest, and he exclaimed, "How did Qin Yu die?" He naturally did not believe that Qin Yu had died from illness now, and could not help but fly into an uncontrollable rage. "Qin Yu?" Duan Jingji smiled calmly. "Oh, she objected to my joining our sacred sect, so I could only refine her into my corpse soldier so that she would stay by my side eternally." "You're inhumane!" Guan Yuan shouted in fury, flames of rage practically shooting from his eyes. Duan Jingji laughed loudly and answered, "Of course I'm not human. Now that I have entered into this divine sect, our lives have transcended the level of mortals. In my eyes, you all are merely food and materials to be refined into corpse soldiers. Forget it. I can't be bothered to waste my words on you. Just obediently become my corpse soldiers." After he was done talking, he actually turned around and left. "Stop!" Guan Yuan, in his fury, did not care any longer that Duan Jingji was in the spiritual pedestal tier and was much more powerful than himself. He merely wanted to chase after him. However, he had just reached the doorway when he saw a palm strike shooting towards him. The palm was as thin as withered bones and completely black, emanating a strong repulsive stench. Guan Yuan quickly halted and delivered a punch. Martial intent encircled his fist, and he shot out 2 flashes of fist chi. Pun! With this exchange of blows, Guan Yuan was instantly flung backwards, but his opponent did not get any advantage either. He was also forced to retreat multiple steps backward, and it was only when he collided with the wall behind him that he finally stopped. "What is this damn thing?" Yu immediately exclaimed in shock. It was a half-rotted corpse that had blocked Guan Yuan, but it was as if there were invisible strings moving it around. It was actually capable of moving nimbly and freely by itself, and it immediately attacked again, charging into the room. This room was already pitifully small in the first place, and now that another person had entered, there was practically almost no space left even for movement, and it was extremely cramped. Guan Yuan attacked in his madness. He was extraordinarily furious, and wanted to kill Duan Jingji at all costs. "That would be a corpse soldier. It's formed by using some special technique to refine a dead body into something akin to a puppet," Ling Han said. "If it wasn't for the fact that the main ingredient to produce it was a human body, such a creation would really deserve to be called genius." "You're impressed by it?" Yu sucked his teeth. "From a certain aspect, yes. However," Ling Han's eyes iced over, "this Thousand Corpse sect must be eliminated." "I agree with that, but now, it would be difficult for us to even escape," Yu said. "Don't worry. I told you that we would be able to leave safely." Ling Han smiled calmly. He stretched out his left hand and pressed down on the man in the coffin. Multiple black patterns appeared. This was the power of regulation that he had obtained after he had refined the demonic qi. In the past, he had merely touched Feng Yan and the latter's whole left leg was gone. Pooh! He struck out with a palm, and instantly, a large hole appeared in the chest of the man lying in the coffin. However, the man's eyes snapped open abruptly. He stared at Ling Han with wide eyes, but in the next instant, his head tilted, and he was now completely dead. Chapter 363 Great Battle Against the Corpse Soldiers. Chapter 363 Great Battle Against the Corpse Soldiers. Duan Jingji! Guan Yuan's fury had reached extreme depths. He exchanged a furious series of attacks with that corpse soldier, wanting to chase away this rock that was blocking his way, catch up to Duan Jingji, and make him pay for his evil deeds. Yet the corpse soldier, having no fear of death nor the sensation of pain, did not step back a single inch and continued to battle furiously with him. "That's odd, Duan Jingji left just like that." Yu was surprised. It would be a piece of cake to subdue 3 people in the spiritual ocean tier like them if Duan Jingji, who was in the spiritual pedestal tier, had acted personally. Ling Han smiled and said. Duan Xingji disdained from making his move, most likely because he has full confidence we will not be able to escape. You can still smile in this situation when we're heavily surrounded? Yu Kaiyu forced out through gritted teeth. Then what other expression do you want me to have? Ling Han laughed loudly, and continued to say boldly. Don't worry. Since I brought the two of you out, I will bring the two of you back as well. Hopefully not as 3 corpses. Yu Kaiyu sighed. Not as 3 corpses, but rather 3 corpse soldiers. A voice was heard from outside the doorway, yet it was not Duan Xingji. Instead, the voice belonged to another man. There's someone else here? Yu Kaiyu's expression abruptly changed. Ling Han rolled his eyes at him, and said, Aren't you spouting nonsense now? How many people are there in the Duan clan? If they were all corpse soldiers, then wouldn't their cover be completely blown during daytime? They are the real disciples of the Thousand Corpse sect, and corpse soldiers are merely their tools. A mere boy is actually so familiar with our sect? A shocked voice could be heard from outside. Ling Han nodded at Yu Kaiyu and said, You go and help out Big Brother Guang, and then we'll charge out. Yu Kaiyu nodded and immediately took a great leap. He flew over Guang Yuan's head and charged to attack that corpse soldier. The exchange of blows between Guan Yuan and that corpse soldier had just forced the two of them to retreat successively, and with this added attack from Yu Kaiyu, the corpse soldier was forced to retreat even further backwards. Why do I have to listen to that brat? Yu Kaiyu scratched his head in confusion. He had not considered things carefully before he had moved to do as Ling Han had said, but now that he thought about it, he felt a little depressed. He was the senior brother here. Yet Guan Yuan took his place, and shot out another punch of his own. How big was the stone chamber? With the onslaught of these 3 successive attacks, the corpse soldier was forced out of the room, and Ling Han and the others took advantage of the opening to rush out. However, when they saw the scene outside, they could not help but grit their teeth. There were a lot of corpse soldiers, but there were also a lot of normal-looking people. Obviously, these people were the disciples of the Thousand Corpse sect, and they were the people controlling these corpse soldiers. That's the 3rd elder of the Zhang clan, Zhang Hu! Yu Kaiyu suddenly exclaimed in shock, pointing at one of the corpse soldiers, then turning to point at another. Li Ding Yi of the Li clan! He pointed at a 3rd corpse soldier. Gu Shun Tong of the Gu clan! He pointed out one corpse soldier after another, and managed to call out the names of at least 10 corpse soldiers from when they were still alive. He could not help but look aghast, and exclaimed, You people are really deranged. These people are already dead, and you still dug them out and refined them into your corpse soldiers. TSK. What do you mean by deranged? These people are already dead anyways, so wouldn't it be better to exploit them of the last of their usefulness and make them contribute more to this society? A man who was about 50 years old said. And the 3 of you as well. When we act later, we will try to be as gentle as possible and not damage your bodies too seriously. For 3 people in the spiritual ocean tier, if we're lucky, we may still be able to preserve that kind of ability after we refine them into corpse soldiers. Maniacs! You're all maniacs! Yu Kaiyu shouted angrily. He withdrew a pair of knuckles from within his spatial ring and put them on. They were immediately activated and multiple golden patterns lit up. His battle spirit was soaring like flames of war. Kill them! Those people of the Thousand Corpse sect manipulated their corpse soldiers, which surrounded Ling Han and the others. Limited by their cultivation level and the condition of rearing corpses, disciples of the Thousand Corpse sect were usually only capable of rearing a single corpse soldier, though a few might be able to rear 2. The disciples gathered here were obviously of a normal level, and could not possibly possess the 3 lives corpse caskets like Rong Huan Xian. As a result, each of them only reared a single corpse soldier. But there were more than 10 people here, so naturally there were more than 10 corpse soldiers as well. All of them were in the spiritual ocean tier and were 1st tier silver-armored corpses. With absolute superiority in numbers, together with how the corpse soldiers did not fear death and injury, wouldn't it be extremely easy to deal with 3 people in the spiritual ocean tier? Both Yu Kaiyu and Guan Yuan wore serious expressions, especially Guan Yuan. He wanted to seek justice for Nong Qin Yu, so it was even more necessary for him to preserve his own life. Only the weak mourned, whereas the strong would use their fists to make their point. The corpse soldiers had no emotion, and did not know how to speak. With their commands in place, they charged towards Ling Han and the others. Yu Kaiyu and Guan Yuan immediately moved. Pun 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 pun, and they were embroiled in a battle with the corpse soldiers. These two had not had any experience battling corpse soldiers, and treated them as if they would any other opponent, yet this made their situation dangerous. Because you might deliver a punch to the head of a martial artist and force him to retreat, but the corpse soldiers did not care. You could hit them as you liked, and they would still continue in their path of attack to return a punch as well, or direct a slash at your throat. If a corpse soldier was hit, at most their heads might be bent out of shape or completely detached. That was all right, they could simply attach it back. But if a martial artist was hit with such a strike, would he still be alive? However, the two of them were experienced in battle, and soon adapted their styles of attack. However, they still could not deal with the corpse soldiers, because no matter how much these things were wounded, it would not affect their battle prowess. So how were they supposed to continue fighting against them? You two are really too weak. It's already been so long, and you are still unable to deal with these things? Ling Han sighed. Easier said than done. Why don't you give it a try then? Yu Kaiyu said in irritation. He and Guan Yuan had to battle 7 corpse soldiers each, and every single one of them seemed to have indestructible, immortal bodies. It was only because of his shocking battle prowess that he managed to hold on until now. If he only had about 9 battle stars, then he would have definitely been overwhelmed by now. Ling Han laughed and said, You really want me to act? Of course. Come on, I'm about to die from exhaustion. Yu Kaiyu urged. He put a considerable amount of trust in Ling Han's battle prowess. Let's have a bet then. In the time for 10 breaths, I can kill all of these corpse soldiers. Yet Ling Han was not in a rush at all. Ha! Yu Kaiyu naturally did not believe him. Though he also hoped that Ling Han could show off his invincible might and resolve the crisis. But even he only just managed to hold on, yet Ling Han was capable of destroying so many corpse soldiers in the time of 10 breaths. That was obviously impossible. What do you want if you win? He was a man of forthright and bold character, and was not one to yield easily either. I haven't thought of it yet, so why don't you promise to do one thing for me in the future? Ling Han said after some thought. Don't worry. It'll definitely be something within your ability. Fine, then hurry up. If you really manage to kill all these corpse soldiers, I will even be willing to owe you my life. Yu Kaiyu called out loudly. The pressure that the 7 corpse soldiers exerted on him was getting higher and higher. Ling Han laughed. His body moved, and he had already charged to attack a corpse soldier. He shot out a punch and black-colored demonic patterns wove around his fist. Pun! He clashed directly with an attack from the corpse soldier, and his whole body flew backwards from the impact, showing that his ability was actually beneath that corpse soldier's. But the strange thing was, the arm of that corpse soldier began to flake off and dissolve, as if it had become an old skeleton which, with the corrosive power of time, was turned to ashes. You're tuning into the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.